Good evening, everyone. Today's 25th of January, 7:33, and we are going to start our work session with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good evening, folks, on this very chilly evening, and hoping that the weather will not be as bad as they're predicting, with many inches of snow. Okay. Are there any comments from the board, any announcements before we get fully started? Okay, I don't have any major announcements except that I enjoyed being with the county executive this past Monday. The county executive during his tenure meets, and I think he basically gives a spotlight to various municipalities and businesses. So Ossining was up at bat. I wanted to share with the larger public in the county and with George Latimer and Ken Jenkins, some of the work that's being done in Ossining. There was a lot of conversation about COVID, and the big news item there from the county was that numbers have flattened out, as was expected post the holiday season. Interesting comments that were made was that the government is doing really, especially in Westchester, as much as it can, but really the super spreaders are really in people's dining rooms and living rooms, a place where government doesn't really influence. That seemed to be an interesting theme, that so much is happening because people, especially in the wintertime, are staying indoors. So we are continue to recommend vaccinations for everyone over the age of 5, and to vaccinate and get the booster shots as much as everyone can. And I gave a shout out to all of our first responders, specifically OVAC, who has done, I think my words were, a Herculean task in giving out something north of 11,000 vaccinations and 8,000 tests. We are the only municipality that I am proud to say has been doing almost all of that free of charge to the folks who both live in Ossining, work in Ossining, but for the most part, there were a couple of instances where you had to prove you were from Ossining, but for the most part, it was whoever showed up at the door. I think it speaks volumes to this community in the most optimistic and positive way. It reminded me something Trustee Lopez said 18 months ago, I think, 18 or 20 months ago. Let's see if he remembers, which is when asked, what is one of the reasons he enjoys about being a trustee or became a trustee. I think you said, I want to keep people out of misery, was something very close. So I don't have it in front of me, but it's stuck in my mind.
To reduce suffering.
Really? Because I actually have the word misery embedded in my head, but okay. And it touched me. And when I stood there on Monday as a podium, and just a couple of us in there because of COVID, I have to say that it brought me back to that moment, because when I speak about OVAC, that is sort of my underline and my word that I didn't say this publicly, but I'll say it now. It reminded me of what it feels like to live in a community where that is exactly what we're doing. And genuinely makes me happy and proud. And I'm glad that we're able to do it. And I know it's a huge challenge, because while OVAC does it predominantly for free, and because it gets grants from many levels of government, it shocks me that in one of the most affluent communities in the country, we're the only ones that do that. Why other communities aren't doing the same is frankly a little shocking to me, but nevertheless, I'm proud to live in a community that does. So I wanted to share that. I hope everyone feels that kind of pride. in the really hard work that OVAC's been doing, but also all the first responders that are out there serving the public, including not so much first responders, but our staff who continue to do all the work they do. So that was part of the theme, and that the numbers are going down. Westchester County has a very high vaccination rate. Also good to know. And there are a lot of rules and etc. that's being changed now for children the age of 5 and up. That's sort of the next wave, and we'll see where that takes us. So having said that, and just talking about some of the things that we had mentioned, Village Manager, I think you're on.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. First on our agenda tonight, we have Mike Risko from the Austining Arts Project to provide a report on the Austining Arts Project, which is a village committee. And we welcome Mike and
thank you.
Look forward to his report.
All right. So you want me to just give you a rundown of a little bit of the history and what's happened and what we've been doing, things like that, right?
Right. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you guys too.
So what we do, a little bit different this year than the past, but in theory the same. We have about a dozen boards, and all of the chairs and or designated representatives, doesn't really matter to us, come in front of the board to sort of do, hey, this is what we did year to date. I know it's January, Mike, but imagine going back about, X number of months. This is what we're looking to do. And if they need something specific or support, etc., to enlighten us, and we'd like to keep it to a few minutes, certainly not past 10 minutes. And the board might have some questions or comments. So that's sort of the format.
Sure. Okay. Well, so this committee, the OAP committee, has in the past, we've had some mixers where we were getting together and, mostly restaurants in the area and different locations, and had artists come together to meet each other and hopefully form some collaborations together. And we have had a couple, like we had a dancer and a musician. The musician played, the dancer danced, people watched the artists collaborate together. There may have been other collaborations outside of there where, people are meeting and doing different projects together. In the early days of the OAP, we did do a lot of concerts every maybe quarter of the year, live music concert. That was fun, and I thought brought some more music to the community, which was good. There are some things that we're working on now that I'd really like to push forward. One of them is public art. I'm sure you've all been to lots of different towns and cities around the country where there's public art on buildings, whether privately owned or owned by villages or towns. I always thought that would be a great thing to do, to commission a professional artist. And, in Nashville, they have wings. People stand in front to get their pictures taken with the wings in the back to promote. It'd be great to have a local artist do it, but I know quite a few artists that do things like that, murals, and to maybe get some kids involved, where we have art kids from the school district participate in some event where we have a professional artist kind of running it, directing it. We could even use my building. I'm willing to use one of the walls to, paint a mural on it. That would be one thing we've been talking about. I think part of the thing I've noticed is a lot of times when we start talking about these ideas, they get too big, too fast, and require too much, too much information, too many approvals, too many of this or that. And I'd like to just kind of get some of these things happening. The other thing that I would love to do that we did discuss with our committee is a musical playground. There is, I'm happy to send you guys information, pictures, and all kinds of things about what I've discovered, but there's a business called, it's called Harmony Parks. And what they do is they build playground equipment that is just like what you'd see in a playground, like that kind of quality equipment that will last forever. But instead of playground equipment that you climb on, they're actually musical instruments. They have resonating and non-resonating instruments. Some of them, the sound travels very far, which might be irritating in some places, but they do playgrounds with one piece or like 10 pieces. they're tuned together in certain keys with certain scales that work together. People have recorded albums in these parks. They also do install these pieces of equipment on walkways, like they'll have a path and they'll have one, like harp with mallets that you can stop and play. And so that I found really interesting. They're all over the place. So that's from Harmony Parks, is the company that builds that equipment. So I just thought that would be a neat thing. And the other thing that we had talked about was having guitar boxes. I once saw a 2020 show. I don't know, is 2020 still on? I don't even know anymore. But years ago, I saw this show. Somebody donated in London pianos. They took real pianos, then they put them outside around the city. And people were getting together and playing them and having fun and sharing stories about, growing up playing piano and all these collaborations. None of them got graffitied or destroyed or vandalized. They do get ruined, of course, after a while, having pianos outside. But, I thought one day I would love to just leave a guitar. I'm sure somebody probably take it, but if I just left a guitar somewhere in town and see if people sit down and play it. But I wanted to sort of put something together where I can get one of my manufacturers to donate, maybe a half dozen guitars and put them somewhere in some kind of covered thing, even if it's a trailer that we bring around, and just leave it for people to go play the guitar and try this out and just make our community a little more musical. Anyway, those were some of the ideas. The public art, musical playground, and the guitar box idea were just some broad ideas that, that I had that we were talking about with the committee. Anyway, those are some of the things that we're working on. And I'd love to get more involved with you guys and see, like, is there is there funding for that? Is there, do I present a particular idea to you guys? How do we go about that kind of thing?
Okay. Was that it?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
We did have a little video that I think
Oh.
Maddie was going to share with us, but right. Is that right?
Yes,
It's
I
only
know.
like
Do
a
you want me-
minute long.
Do you want me to play it? Are you
Yeah, that'd
ready?
be great. All right.
Okay.
Jamie's
No
playing it.
problem.
Yeah.
I'm playing.
It's just a little quick thing.
Sure. Well,
Is
that was
it?
too, that was
That's
probably
okay.
that might have been too quick.
There's no
I
sound
know,
right at the
it's
very
because
beginning,
I
I
shared it
think.
wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
All right.
These were some of the events that we had.
As it turns out, it can
And, sorry. Not it either. Okay, hold on.
Is that the right video? Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened.
That's okay. This is it.
Here we are. Woohoo!
Ted Daniels, he was a dancer. Ted is a musician, and so they've worked on a collaboration. They just had a performance at the Wood Arts Theater at the library, but they've got a few more coming up. So Ted, if you want to talk a little bit about it.
And as it turns out, it continues to this day. So we're on our fourth year. So that's one of the things about
That was it. It was just a couple little events that we had. We just happen to have some pictures and video from it. So
I'm going to open this up to the board for comments. I'll go at the end. Questions, comments, thoughts. Anybody?
I'll start. I want to welcome you, Mike, on behalf of OAP. Super exciting. I think my big question is around kind of collaboration. I know that there has been real burgeoning of art throughout the Hudson Valley in a lot of different ways, but particularly public art. And so I'm curious about any opportunities for collaboration that either the village has with either your group specifically, or like groups of artists generally, or collaboration with other groups. Because what I would love to see is more art in Ossining.
Is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All of them are questions to you.
Yes.
You're the
You're the man of
Okay.
the hour.
You're asking me if to do more collaborations with other groups in the community.
So I'm saying, like, knowing what you know about the current landscape as it stands in Ossining, what opportunities for collaboration do you see?
Well, I mean, I think just getting together and brainstorming with people is a great idea. I mean, I know if we had a list of other art groups in Westchester, I mean, I'm happy to reach out and see what we can do. If we sit around and just kind of talk about how to get more public art. I mean, I love all that stuff, like, paintings on buildings, murals, sculptures, all of that. Having more music, just for me as a musician, I don't know that we're doing Make Music Day. There's a lot of music around already. I'd like to see this town become a little more alive with artwork, and there is obviously some of it, but I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I'm happy to reach out to any other groups that we could find.
Mike, I have a question. There was some young people came, I've been liaison now for a year, and some young people came to talk about a mural, remember?
Yeah.
What happened with that? Do you know?
I don't know. We haven't met for a little bit due to things going on with COVID and other things. But yes, I know there was talk with a group about getting a mural done on the community center. I think that was what we were talking about last, but I don't know anything more about that, but I'm happy to reach out and find out more about it and get back to you on that.
Okay.
all right. Anybody else? I can't
do.
see you guys. Oh, there you are, Manny. I didn't see
Thank you,
anybody.
Mayor. Oh, thank you. Mike, it's always good to see you and always good to hear your music.
Thank you.
Want to thank you and everybody in the committee for all the hard work that you guys do. A little bit of maybe not too much of a history, sure, because I always go back to the same. I'm the oldest on the board. But many years ago, when we did the bicentennial portion of it, one of the things that the mayor at that time, Bill Hanauer, what we did is we did a sculpture around the village. And for some folks, some they liked, some of they thought it was a little weird that it was maroon paint done on the sidewalks to actually guide people to all the different sculptures that we had around the village. And right after that, one of the things that the board at that time committed ourselves is to become, an art village. And we passed several resolutions in regards to that. And that's how this committee was formed at that time. That was the beginning of it. This reminds me a little bit of that. And I love the idea and I love the concept of bringing music to the parks. I would love to see more of what you think. And I just did a quick Google on the Harmony portion that you just mentioned. And
Harmony Park.
Yes. And it seems like pretty cool things. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to do something like that in some of our parks. And I'll be the one, just playing around with that with my daughter because she loves music. And she, I think it becomes not just as music elements, but more like a sculpture piece that brings different activities to not just for kids, but also for adults as well. I think it's very interesting. And maybe just think outside the box, maybe not just parks, but I know we have, I love the idea of murals and things of that nature, but, how do we bring art to the streets? It's not, and I love the concept of leaving instruments on the street and I seen some of that stuff around Europe, not necessarily here in the United States, but I've seen videos at least that some countries in Europe, they do that kind of concept. And it works. So I'll be interested to see actually, and to see if you guys can put something together. Maybe start something small, obviously, and bring that in front of the board, and we'll be able to evaluate that and kind of, I'll be in favor of something that I think my first choice will be a park. You know, how do we integrate music to the kids and kind of take it from there? You know, I seen that, I seen like, you know, keyboards on the steps, you know, like people go up and down the stairs instead of using the escalators, you know, and they kind of play, you know, it becomes a music piece. You know, what I also seen on the streets or highways with the rumbling portions of it, depends on how you do it, you know, becomes a musical part. You know, so it's very interesting how things, little things like that can play out and become art. And the view of some people. So I'll be interested in seeing that. So I'll look forward for you guys to come up with a concept and bring in front of us. I'll be supportive of something like that.
Thank you. You know, if I could just respond to that, I appreciate that. The Harmony Parks, you know, if you guys want to look at that, it is really cool. And I saw it at the NAMM show when I was in California, and you know, I thought this would be a really cool thing to have in our town. But the other thing that I'm always sort of thinking about in the background, just sort of as an entrepreneur, is, you know, the business side of this. Those kinds of things draw people from, you know, miles away. You know, if you want to bring somebody here from an hour away to come see Ossining, I mean, there are things here already to look at. But, you know, if there was like a music equipment park, you know, I think people that have little kids will drive, you know, an hour to come here. And it's about commerce. You know, you start getting people that live an hour away from all different directions coming here because we have this really cool music park that nobody's ever, I don't think there are any in Westchester. I did a lot of research on it. I have to look at my notes, but I don't think there was any in Westchester. They're all out west, and there was like one in Brooklyn somewhere, but like not much of a park. But people would drive a long distance, and then all of a sudden you have all these new families here who are like, wow, check this town out, you know, who go out to eat, who do different things. And, you know, that was just the follow through of what that could bring us.
I agree with that.
So, again, welcome, Mike. Thank you. That Harmony Parks thing is like, I like that. Just thinking off the top of my head, like down the riverfront, down at Gordian Park, where we seem to get tons and last year of action down there, parks being used, excuse me. I mean, I support this idea totally. I'd like to see more from that Harmony Parks. I mean, I looked at it real quick, and it looks very interesting. And if there's maybe do some sort of a pilot thing with it and pick somewhere to do it, and let's see how it goes. And I'm all for being interactive and making this a destination. So with everything we've got going on, it can only enhance what we're doing in the village. So again, thank you. And I do support what you have. I'd like to see it coming back in front of us with maybe some sort of a plan.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Mike, and trustees. So I'm going to echo everyone's words. I just don't want to be redundant. So one of the things with boards, some boards have very clear charters, zoning, planning, EAC. They're actually by charter. There's lots of boundaries and regulations and support. I mean, they have a very specific purpose. And it seems to me this is the kind of committee that's a little bit more fluid in what it wants, depending on who's on the board. How many people do you have right now on this board?
I think there's 5 of us.
Okay. And were you able to?
It's changed quite a bit.
Okay.
You know, it's been quite fluid with the members.
Okay. And the reason I bring this up is so the most effective thing to do is there's a distance between ideation and execution, right? So we're having a bit of somewhat ideation session in some ways. Ideas, I'm assuming it came from a committee. It's not just your ideas. They may just be your ideas. Not sure it's all that important right now. It only becomes important that if there's a committee, there has to actually be minutes and agreement, because if we go down a path and find out other members or another member didn't agree to it, it didn't know, then we get into a whole different sort of issue, because these are committees set up for government, for the board actually supports some of the work. So my suggestion is that you've got actually, I think all three of your ideas were great, is to sort of focus with the committee and say, hey, these are things that I'm interested in. Is everybody on board? What are the next steps? How much money does it cost? Where does the money come from? Because unless it's in our budget, which none of these are, obviously, because it's the first time we're hearing about them, projects only get done at this level of government when they're discussed, vetted, agreed to, there's a plan, money has to be put towards it. If the board agrees, staff has to have its input. An example that we've seen with artwork is that public space belongs to the public, not to individuals of the public. So murals on public buildings are actually not so easy to do. On a private building, maybe a little bit easier to do. And you had sort of mentioned your place, which, you know, I think would be a beautiful contribution to the village, bring people together. That's an option, which is different than on public buildings,
Right.
which are much more difficult to do, if at all, depending on where they are and what they are. So I think Trustee Fritchie said it. Everybody liked your idea, especially with the park issue. You're 100% right. You know, like Legoland, build Legos, then they had a place, and all of a sudden, like every school down county is using their format for camps. I mean, they started small and now it's huge. It's a private business. Nevertheless, the concept is great because it brings kids together, right? After school programs, I mean, it really like went crazy. All of us played with, well, not all, I don't know what everybody did when they were kids, but Legos have been around forever. But when they created parks out of it, when they created them bigger, all of a sudden competitions, it takes on like a beautiful life form where art comes to people's neighborhoods. So I think the board loves some of the ideas from a total, like, how do you get things done point of view? So you're not spinning wheels with ideas, but rather go out from the idea to collaboration, to your group agreeing to it, to your liaison helping you with it, and come back with, here's the plan, here's what it looks like. I want to check in with you guys. I'd like to understand how to move forward. That is where we can actually act upon it. With all of our intentions, that would be great. And if it brings art to the village, we have a lot of artists in all forms and shapes, whether it's people who work on Broadway in all its capacity, movie industry, you know, Hollywood, like show writers also. I mean, to bring some of these folks together would be beautiful and use our local assets. So if you could hone in a little bit on that, then we can move forward beyond the idea stage. Because I think everybody's sitting there, wow, thanks for doing your homework. Thanks for coming up with some things that sounds like not one of us in this gallery, at least on the board. There might be other folks on here that have heard of it, have heard of this. So thank you for bringing that. But now, if you want to move it forward without getting frustrated, because people do get frustrated with government, the frustration for me, in my experience, has been, it's because you didn't lay it out the way you would for a business, the way you would say, this is my next steps, and here's where I need your help, and this is where I need private money, and this is where I need public money. Am I allowed to do it? Are there regulations? Like, to move that ball down the field, so to speak, would be great. And I appreciate you coming here. And I would also suggest that you get the group together through Zoom. Keep some minutes that people were there, what they agreed to, work out your own as a group. Make sure that there isn't disagreement within the group about the direction, because that too will be a roadblock that this legislative body will not be able to help with, because that's really a committee kind of a thing. Those are just like, to make this happen, those are sort of my thoughts on it, because the thoughts themselves seem really something that the board would be supportive of. I just want to make sure we include the other members of your group. Does that make sense to you, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the three ideas that I just presented to you were all ideas that I've discussed with the board for the last, probably 2 years when I brought some of these ideas up, and everybody on the board was like, oh, great idea, and
Okay.
with the Harmony Parks, actually, I had done a lot of research with that and contacted Harmony Parks and have pricing and all different kinds of information.
Right.
So it's something that we've discussed, we just never kind of went forward with it. So I'm happy to, redo that, kind of visit with them and talk to everybody about all these suggestions that you're making about, and I totally agree. It's like a business, how to make this move forward.
Right. Well, you know me, Mike, right? I'm a very pragmatic person. Like, we could talk about a lot of stuff, but if we want to move it forward, which to me would be the point of why people sit on committees, is because they want to do something. They want to help in some way. And again, some of our committees, it's very pointed by charter, by rule, by policy, whatever what they're supposed to do. Some are a little bit more fluid. This is a fluid part. I don't want to be the last to speak because I know Dana is the liaison, but I don't know if I've left something off, or Dana, did I leave anything off, or all good?
Yep, sounds good. I mean, we did have, I think the last thing that the group did, or that I was involved in, was a meetup at the boathouse. I think it was, Mike, do you remember, was it last?
Was that the one in the summer though? Because I know I was away, I think for.
Yeah, you weren't there. Yeah, so we had a good turnout. We had a lot of people from the Austining Arts Council, which I know has been interested in maybe collaborating on some things.
Right.
Which I think is probably a pretty fertile area to explore.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be great to get back on a regular schedule of meetings and start moving forward.
Well, that might also, I think, when I looked up some of these things, Mike, if your group could sort of submit to village staff, whether it's, Maddie or Jamie or the village manager, just a schedule of meetings. You might want to take August or July off. You might say, oh, actually, that's the busiest. December, we don't want to meet. Just some meetings, because this is a committee that works with government, so that people know, like, you can always cancel a meeting.
Yeah.
But in that way, the liaison knows, or whatever. I think that would also add some, I think some power to the group to know and help the rest of us. I think that would be very helpful in case somebody wants to present something to you, whatever. The public should know when you guys meet. It's just helpful.
Sure.
Stuart, do they need to keep minutes on this committee? I don't think that they do, but
No.
Okay, great. Okay, Mike, thank you very much.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Manny,
Before I
please.
forget, while I was talking, after you spoke, one of the things that I do remember, I am the liaison for the Rec Advisory Board. So Mike, if you guys would like to go with the concept of the idea of the parks and do something like that, I mean, my suggestion will be to obviously to coordinate with the Rec Advisory Board as well. They do oversee all the parks, so I think it will be helpful for them to understand, something that it may be coming in front of the board. Maybe they have some suggestions as well, not to put another layer on the concept of you coming in here, but they do oversee the parks. So that will be the only caveat, I guess, that I could add to this conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned, what seems like bureaucracy, when done right, is an advocate. If it's done right, that group will advocate. They also present in front of us. They submit all sorts of reviews of the parks. They could be your biggest advocate. They might even impress upon you, like they're very familiar with the parks. What would be the right park? They're going to be involved in the DRI directly, indirectly, as we look at community center as one of the potential big projects. Might have some input there, so that it's part of the whole shtick. So just ideas, just food for thought. Not trying to add burden, just giving you some thoughts and sharing our thoughts with you.
Yeah, good. I think it's great. I'm happy to go through, that park idea is something that I was really excited about and still am. I mean, I think that would be a great thing. I think it's great to have mixers and collaborate and make art and, play music and paint and things like that. But, I think doing something like more substantial that can last and like be part of the community would be really valuable to all of us.
Great.
I'm so glad that Trustee Casada, you brought that up. I think that if again, to get anything going in the parks, the Recreation Department and the Rec Advisory Board are the place to go. Mike, I do want to mention and remind the board that we have funding for 2 park projects. One in Vets Park, new equipment in Vets Park, which will be implemented this year. And then new equipment at Nelson Fitting Park, which is a couple of years down the road through a community development block grant. But right now we're looking for, we're actually looking at Vets Park. We're starting to price equipment. So now would be a good time to meet.
Yeah.
So what I'll do following this meeting is email you and hook you up. And that way we can get more input about Harmony Parks and that equipment and hopefully incorporate it.
Great. Okay.
Right. No, I mean, I think the village manager is right. If there is a time, this is it. This is
Okay.
like, you may have just struck like the right chord, excuse the pun,
All right. Good.
to do this. I'm tone deaf, so you'll never see me like
We
playing an
can,
instrument.
we can straighten you out. We can
Oh,
fix that for you.
oh my God.
Now,
There's
if
a
you
long,
guys
there's a
look-
long list of people who've said that to me about so many things, but okay, I'll add you on there. No, Mike, seriously, I think that the village manager is basically saying to you, this timing, we hear you saying you've been working for 2 years, but this timing may, sometimes things line up and sometimes they don't. And I think she's suggesting that they get lucky a little bit here and that things are lining up on this kind of a project. And I do want to say in a public meeting, we're not recommending any particular vendor for anything. This is not like an ad for any specific vendor. I think you're just using it because you've done research and you like the work this particular company does.
That is correct. I think, I've done a lot of research on this. That is I think the only company that builds this equipment. And
This
it's like,
particular, yeah.
yeah. And it's actually, I mean, you guys, if you look up that website, you'll see some very interesting, really cool videos. I mean, they have so
Okay.
much, it's like playground equipment, but it's
Right.
music equipment.
Yes, I think that's what the village manager already figured out. So,
Yeah.
which is why she's bringing forward. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Say hello to Miriam
Okay, guys.
from me, and I'm sure the rest of the board. Thank you for all that you guys do in our community, especially during COVID. Always appreciate it. And we will see you soon.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, good
Risko?
evening.
If I'm sorry, this just popped in my head, for announcements.
Oh.
It's real brief. I just would like to give a shout out to Richard Wishney, who is one of our own, and as the town supervisor and as a county legislator, he is formally appointed as the head of emergency services. He was interim for the past year. Now the county executive has formally appointed him, well-deserved position, and I'm sure the rest of us wish him the best. That's all.
Thank you, Bob. I'm glad you mentioned it. Commissioner, I think, was the
Commissioner,
title.
Commissioner of Emergency Services.
Right. If we all play our cards right, we will have, we already have so many outstanding people that are at the county and it's not about elected. I mean, who really represent this community well. So very exciting stuff, very long career. And he's also done a lot of volunteer work. Thanks for bringing that up, Bob. Appreciate it. Okay, village manager, we're right back at you. And you're on mute.
I did think I unmuted. Thank you very much. Next, we'll be discussing the village seal. As you know, this is a project that the board has been looking at with input and giving a thoughtful consideration. A seal is an important part of the village identity. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Trustee Dana White and Brian Sheridan of Hothouse Design.
Thank you, Karen. So last year, as you know, the village commissioned a survey asking whether we should redesign the village seal. 60% of the people responding, most of them village residents, said yes. So they feel that it's time to find a seal that reflects what the village is today and moving forward into the future. So we asked them, well, what do you think should be in the seal? And among the elements were the river, our river view, the double arch bridge, Main Street, especially our historic architecture. So we went to Brian Sheridan of Hothouse, who is an amazing graphic designer, local talent. He does a lot of commissions in this area. He has lots of experience. And we asked him to come up with some options, and he is here tonight to run through them for us.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I submitted a presentation. I hope all of you have had a chance to review. This is
I think we're going to be able, I think we're doing it now.
I think
Yes.
Maddie is going to
Yeah.
control the screen.
Where we are.
So I put together 14 different ideas, and they span from traditional, more familiar solutions to more conceptual solutions. Always trying to hit the themes that are important to the people of the village, and that being, again, Dana outlined them, but the architecture, the landmark characteristics, the geographic location, possibly a mascot who wasn't really brought up specifically, but the spirit of the community. And there are things that repeat themselves in this presentation purely because they are unique to Ossining. I'm not saying that they're the best solution, but they are definitely unique to Ossining. And as we go through the presentation, you will see some of those repeat themselves. This first one is probably the most familiar and traditional solution for Ossining. You've seen it with the town seal. A more traditional rendering of the double arch. What I was envisioning here was to enliven it, to give it a lot more energy than past renditions of it. This is still a rough rendering, but I'm envisioning it in a WPA travel style where it really has a lot of electrifying colors and works in poster form all the way down to small. Now with all these concepts, you're going to see how that particular concept works from a larger viewpoint to a smaller viewpoint, how it works on positive light, on negative background, how it works in a black and white form, both positive and negative, and how it works reduced to a line form. Again, this one in particular is what I would consider to be a rough rendition. If you felt as though this was the strongest or one of the stronger candidates, this one would definitely go through some more refinement. Next one up, unless you have any comments. The next one.
I think we should look at them and then maybe
Sure.
have some questions.
This one definitely focuses in on a unique, I don't know if it's really unique, but it's a standout piece of architecture that seems to be photographed most often in the village of Ossining. And it's a very simplistic, iconic design, very strong, very graphic. The red O stands for Ossining, of course, and the blue is the architectural element. So it's red, white, and blue. It's got a patriotic vibe. It's just it's pretty much speaks for itself. And there is an alternate version of the star.
Sorry.
I just included that showing a variation. This one is employing a mascot. It wasn't specifically requested, but I live right here in the village, and I've taken notice of hawks all over my street in the trees. And I guess I took notice of them about 10 years ago, and they just seem to be a frequent icon in my world. So I took the initiative and took a look at what a red hawk would look like on a seal. Again, showing that design idea in different sizes and in different usage scenarios, positive, negative, black and white, and line. This one incorporates in a simple line style, the river, the Hook Mountain, the village, and the double arch. So it's a kind of a mural motif knocked out of the O. It's got a nice simplistic vibe to it. This one has problems. Oh, okay. This one is a very,
Sorry, Mr. Sheridan, do you want me to go back?
no, it's okay.
Okay.
We can go back to it if someone wants to talk about it further. This one is a charming play on Matisse. It portrays the community in a very charming, lighthearted, joyous way. This one is another rendition or a take on the double arch in a much more simplistic line version. Variable in a rectangular version. This one is another version of the double arch. So the double arch is the strongest theme, purely because of the unique nature of its relationship to the village. I don't think there's any other place in this country that has that feature. And this one is a modern, stylized version of the double arch, very colorful, very dynamic. This one is a double arch as well. It's just getting more stylized, more conceptual, has a very positive energy feel to it. Again, very modern, very clean. Another double arch, different style technique, slightly different feel to it, but again, the same thing. All right, this is a monogram, a different approach to the seal. This is made up of V for village, O for Ossining, portraying it or rendering it in a gold medallion fashion to give it a sense of quality, achievement.
What is this one has like an alternative. Is that just the font? Can you go?
Yeah. That the one that's
to the
number
right.
one featured one is a sans serif. That one is a serif font. It's just got the same idea, just a little different.
Okay, so because you didn't do
styling.
that with the others, so this one actually you've come up with, okay, if you change the font, it might look like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
This one is it's a conceptual piece. Again, the O O is almost on every one of them. And this one, the idea is synergy, interplay, collaboration, a web of unity. And that's the idea there. This one is taking the double arches and looking at them slightly differently with partial view to create an icon figure. It's just a positive energy thing. It's much more abstract than the others. This is another monogram piece. It's got all 3 letters, 2 O's and the B. It's just a modern, contemporary monogram. And this last one is a contemporary design using double arches in a different way with the radiating light, just to give a positive destination feel to it. And that is the 14 ideas.
Right.
And I'm hoping that out of that collection, we can distill it down to the 4 strongest candidates from your point of view and take it to the next level.
Great.
And refine them farther.
Great.
Mayor, would it be helpful to leave this up on the screen for the discussion so we could scroll around, or do you want me to take it down?
No, I think it would be helpful to keep it up.
Okay.
And sorry, I must be making a lot of noise. If you could go back to the first one, just because I think we'll start at the beginning, go through it, I think. So do you prefer Mr. Sheridan or Brian?
Brian's fine.
Great. Well, Brian, first of all, my profession has been marketing, communications, design work. I don't do the design. I'm usually on the client side. I have to tell you, one of the best presentations, and I worked at Fortune 50 companies. So thank you for bringing this to us, because what you've done here is not only given us a lot to look at, you've so well articulated, your thought process, what can be changed. But these sort of designs are not easy to do, as you know, people think they're easy to do, they're not, but they're also different, and that's hard. So I really appreciate all the options you've given us. This will be a very long conversation, because if you only gave us the choice between broccoli and asparagus, it would have been easy, but you've now given us the entire salad and options to choose from. So but I very much appreciate the work that clearly went into this. I do have just a logistical question, then I'm going to open it up and speak last. But because the point here is to come up with 4, right? To somehow come to 4 that we can all agree are the top 4. And I want to get to that. The ownership of all of this work, and Stuart might have to say, and this is just the business side of me, not the mayor's side. Do we own all of these, or only the ones that we use? Stuart or anybody?
The way the contract was written was I'm working for hire, meaning that you technically own all the work that I'm presenting.
Okay, so I appreciate that. For me, it actually makes the conversation even more potent with some of the thoughts. Because in theory, if we choose one at the end of all this, but we might simply like one of the other ones for a different purpose, it feels like we own that and can use it. That's where I was going with that. And I don't want to be out of contract. So something to think about, and we can have a separate conversation, but I thank you for that. So I'm opening it up. I want to go around the gallery, and I think the only way to come up with 5 people with a final selection of 4 is to simply go person by person and have you guys say, these are my top 1, 2, 3, 4, because I don't know how else we're going to finish this, and maybe even a little bit about why, unless somebody has a better idea. Otherwise, we could be here all night. I have sat in meetings where people are deciding between red and green for 3 hours. So, or the shade of the red and the shade of the green. And I've been there, I've done that. I just think if we can get through each of us simply saying 1, 2, 3, 4, or if you just like 2 of them, 1 and 2, and maybe we can come to some next step that's been requested of us. Sound okay to everybody? Shaking heads, we're good? Unless somebody has a better idea, I'm all ears. Looking at the gallery. Okay.
Well, I'll go first.
Thank you, Dana. And thank you, Dana, for all, and also Bob. I forgot to say that for.
Well, Bob, would you
for
prefer to
this.
go first?
No, I'm just thanking the 2 of you.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Dana, start it off.
I love this one. It's probably, it's got a lot going on, but I love that style. But I'll tell you, if you go down to the next one is my favorite. The building. Yeah.
Concept 2.
Yeah, that one is probably my favorite. And then I like several variations on the double arch. I like the hawk, and I'm thinking maybe the high school might want that. It looks like
No, the high school is a different entity.
I mean, we're not we're not known for our Red Hawks, but the fact is we have a lot of them. And, I find it is very fierce and wonderful and different. So I like them. I'm not sure it's quite, but I just like them, but I like, keep going. I wish we had them all up together.
Well, I wrote down 1 so far for you. Is it
like,
1 or 2 that you liked?
4.
You like 4?
I like an idea. I like that idea a lot. 4.
And I think you said, Brian, that the colors can be changed, etc. So that we can, but you're looking for 4 concepts.
Yes, everything is still in play. I would take these as highly developed rough ideas.
Right, but if we wanted red instead of green, as an example, or darker blue versus a purple blue, we could do that. But right now, 4 concepts. Right now, Dana, all I got you down is for number 4 because I couldn't understand if you actually wanted the other ones.
2 and 4.
Okay.
And I like 6. And
he's going through this. The other trustee should also be writing the numbers down. I think it'll go.
I like 7 or some variation on that. There were a couple. I like, I know that the town has the double arch bridge, but that's a very different approach.
Oh, yeah.
I think you would confuse them. So
I got you for 2, 4, 6, 7 or variation of 7.
And I like 9 too. That goes with the other, that some variation on that abstraction of the double arch. I like that a lot. I like the colors in that. Looks like a river. Those are the ones I like.
Okay. I'm going to make, and I'm using a little bit of my professional background now. Brian, the thing that you did on some of them is you included the words Village of Ossining or Ossining, but you didn't carry that through the rest of them. And in my head, I'm picturing what does it look like on a check, a contract, a garbage truck, and a sign on the street, which is, I appreciate that you did different renditions because different fabrications. You did grayscale, did black, white, you did no background, with background. And I'm sure it's also for website usage. But I noticed that some of them have the wording in it and some of them don't. So I'm just writing that as a footnote. And I just wanted to share that with you and everyone else speaking, because as you think about the use of this, not just the feel of it, Village of Ossining or Ossining Village, something like that has to be inside the work somewhere.
You have to be inside.
That's readable.
Or just with it like that.
Well, in a way that it could be used. That's for him to decide, but I'm just saying that has to be done. So I'm just putting that as
we're not obligated to use incorporated 1813 or, I mean, we're not, there's no.
I don't think so.
No, we're not obligated. So, I mean, we have some leeway there.
Yeah. Okay, I got you down. I got you down for 5, but I put them in the order that you gave it to me. Did we say Bob? Are you
Oh.
going next?
Yes, I am going next, absolutely. I'd like to go back to first of all, I'd like to state that being that the town has the double arches, I think we should segregate ourselves from that. That's my personal opinion. I don't want to be like the town. We are the village. All right, we run it separately, and yes, the double arches are an iconic thing. I get it. But I'd like to go to number 3, please.
It's number 3. Sorry, Maddie or Jamie. I don't know who's doing this.
Okay. So what I like about number 3 is the Village of Ossining, and whether it says incorporated 1813 or not, or we could spread that out. I like that. With
Okay.
the concept of taking number 4, we go to number 4.
Mhm.
So this would be, in my eyes, design 15. I like the mountains. I like the river. I like downtown. If we could take the arches out, and this is, we're designing this. We've got ideas, but I'd like to see 2 of them combined, meaning 3 and 4, with the Village of Ossining around it, and that concept there without the arches, and a more broader design of Main Street surrounded by the Village of Ossining. So my 2 choices are 3 and 4, but to be combined as one. And I just personally feel anything with double arches is not, yes, it is in the village. The town has it. I just don't want to be like the town. And, that's where I'm at with that. So 3 and 4 combined without the arches, make downtown a little broader, take the little blank circle out and surround it with Village of Ossining, whatever color. Most of this is going to be, I believe, 1 or 2 colors at best. I think what we have now is just a 1 color line on any trucks or anything like that. So how we decide that doesn't really matter to me. I prefer the 1 color. To me, it's more broader, it stands out more and doesn't get as washed out. I don't think you could put that much color into this design and make it stand. I think it would be blurry. So my opinion, I'm not an artist, just giving you my opinion. So I like this design without the arches, more of the downtown, love the trees. You get your downtown Main Street look here. You get the river, you have the mountains in the back, which I think incorporates any picture you see of Ossining, this is what you see. So, and then surround it with the Village of Ossining, around it somehow, some way. And that's my input.
Okay, I got you down for 3 and 4. That's the order you gave it. That really should be combined in some way. And I think that Brian got your commentary. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing that anybody's married to colors, but you like the fact that it's a singular color. But
yeah, I like the singular color. Listen, anything going on trucks, I mean, yes, the town has some color in theirs. A blue, a green, and a gray and a black, I think, and it just, the black just makes it stand. If that could be accomplished, great. I don't know if something with, this is kind of intricate, sort of. So, but for what it's formally going to be used, maybe it's something just like I said, it could be 2 different ways of doing it. We could do something that's for vehicles and something that's for letterhead.
Could you just raise it up a little bit, Maddie? Maddie, you're the one that's doing this, right? Nope, not this, not the same concept. Just on the bottom, he had, what does it say on the, I can't see the bottom of this page.
Cool.
All right, so this is the picture taken in different formats, because Brian understands that when you put it on paper for brochures versus website versus plasticated fabric, those treatments, the color usually bleeds or does something. So he's showing it to us. So we're going to get, which is fantastic. You don't always get this. This is terrific. What it looks like when the treatment changes for different things. You know, as I said, like if you need to do it for contracts and stamps, it's going to have one rendition, but it all works together here. Okay. Next, we have 5 of us. Who's going next? Thank you, Bob.
I could go next, Mayor.
Okay, Manny, please share with us.
Sure. So I at this point I only have, I like 2, but I prefer 1. No, I'm sorry. I like
you like 2, but you
I like 2 seals, 2 concepts. Let me
Okay.
rephrase that. If you go to 2, number 2, Maddie.
Number 2, okay. Maddie, number 2, there we are.
I like that as an architectural piece and as an architectural element. Unfortunately, I've seen that in other municipalities. You know, so it's not very unique to Austining for me. So if you were to go to please number 4. And I'm gonna agree with Bob on this one, on everything that he said. I think the only other item that I would like to see out of this particular design is to remove the circle in the middle. And kind of, I would like to see the downtown itself. I understand the concept, I just don't see, you know, I would like to see the downtown itself. And those are up number 4 for me. And I'm going to echo what Bob said.
Okay, so you know that if you remove the circle in the middle, it's no longer an O. It's no longer the letter O, right?
I know that.
Oh, okay.
I know, but
I just want to make sure that we understand what you're saying. That's all.
The seal itself is still an O.
It's a
Within the
circle. Yeah,
itself.
it's a circle, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Is that it, Manny? I'm not rushing.
Yep,
I just
that's
want to,
it. No,
we all
that's
know
it.
that what our next steps here, because it said it in the last paragraph.
Yeah.
We all
No, that's it. That's all I
understand
have.
the game here.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's next? I think we have Mr. Lopez, no?
Yes, that's right. I have a question first. The design that we got from Mr. Aviles, is that one completely off the table?
Are you asking the rest of the board?
Yes.
For me, I mean, I'm speaking for me. For me, it's off the board. It to me looks exactly like the town. And that's why we went and brought in a different designer. That's me, 1 person out of 5.
I agree. Off the board.
That is correct for me as well.
Okay. And does anyone have, I tried to find but could not find the survey results from the last survey that we sent out that had questions about like how many elements, which elements, that kind of thing. Anybody have those results handy?
Yeah, I basically just summarized them, Omar. What do you need?
And-
What do you want exactly?
Right. And so of those results, what were, you know, there were like the pictures of the different elements. Like what came out? I don't have those in front of me. So can you just, I'm sorry to have
I think you
repeat
mean
that.
like, there was a question like, do you want the waterfront? Do you
Right,
want the
right,
main
right, right.
street?
Yeah.
I think the bank building was something was on there. I think the double arches were on there, right? I mean, there was
The Hudson
piece on that.
River.
right.
Okay, you want me to go through it?
I just love the results.
The results are out of, okay. 533 respondents. 325 said design a new village seal.
Right. So not all the questions, but just the results of that, like the last part that had
The Hudson
pictures.
River, 203 responses. Response ratio 37.8, so more than a third think the Hudson River. The view of the Hudson River, the shoreline, 52 liked that. The Double Arch Bridge, 321. Sing Sing Correctional Facility, 81.
So just so, because I don't have it in front of me, the percentages. If you get like what got the high? If you can go in percentage order.
Percentages, Double Arch Bridge, almost 60%. 200 Main Street, 12.8%, 3.5. Sassanoro Plaza, the view from Sassanoro Plaza, which was 42%. So the highest responses were the Hudson River, 37.8. The Double Arch Bridge, 59.8. And the view of downtown from Sassanoro Plaza, 41.9.
Okay, so here's my challenge. The challenge is that I hear what the mayor and two trustees have said about wanting our seal to not have the double arches because the town's seal has the double arches.
No, I'm sorry. Your question wasn't that. That may be what two trustees said. Your question was whether the other artist's rendition with the double arch seal, exactly as he provided, which we paid for it and it's ours and all that, whether that's off the tape. For me, that looks exactly the same. I didn't say that their rendition of double bridges, Bob and Manny did, don't work for me, because we're seeing about 7 renditions quite different of the double arch.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful clarification. And so, Manny, do you agree that the double arches are not an option?
I agree with the concept, with what is in front of us right now and how the artist has put that into place. I just don't feel that those arches work with any of those designs. And we have an option, sure. We are picking the options that we are having in here in front of us. So based on that, that's the reason why I made the decision. I mean, the arches is all over the place, and I understand, why he did that, because that was one of the requests, is that it was come out of the survey. I agree with that. Unfortunately for me, none of those options work.
So do you agree with Bob's assessment of design concept for without the double arches?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay.
That's what I said. I mean, eliminate the double arches on option number 4, and bring more from the downtown. He has he can be creative and do something else into that. I mean, Bob brought up very good points on that as well. I think that concept right there, to me, speaks more to what austining is as well. Look, we can discuss the double arches back and forth. The double arches are in the village of Austin, not in the town of Austin. We can go, we have this conversation before. Right now, the options that we're looking at, my assessment and my concept of where I'm going with this is based on what the designs are in front of us. So.
Okay.
I'm not against having a version of the double arch bridges at all. I happen to like the ones I see here better.
Okay. So I hear that. So the reason that I'm asking all of these questions is because I have thoughts, subjective thoughts about I like this design more than this design, but I'm trying to ground whatever my decision is in something that is also larger than just my opinion, so that I would be able to justify it to other people. So to say, like, I don't like a hawk, I think I don't like hawks, to me is like a little bit, and not I use that one as an example because almost no one brought up, well, I guess Bob did bring up the hawk, but like Croton has an eagle in there. They have Eagle Fest, the whole thing. And so it's like, well, we want to differentiate ourselves, whatever. Okay. At least that would be like, there's like a rationale behind it. And so I'm trying to come up with like, what were the survey results? What did all of these various things? The other issue that I have is that, to me, the double arches are hands down the most iconic part of our village, and the village is in the town. And so for the town to have the double arches is kind of like we're trying to decide, a seal for the United States of America, we pick an eagle. It's like eagles are in the United States of America. They're not in every part of the United States of America, but they are in the United States of America. Yeah, like the double bridges are in the town, technically, but they're to me more representative of the village. Okay. With the preamble being said, I'll answer the question directly. I like concept design number 2, the one that is the red circle with the building. I don't like the color because it looks just like the logo for the London Underground Tube. If anybody's ever been there, it looks exactly like that. Like exact color red and like blue. So I would probably choose a different color, but I like personally the simplicity of it. I like that it represents a part of our architectural history, just like the double arch bridges do. And I like that it's somewhat unique as a seal. You know, we saw like a whole bunch of seals when we were talking about seals in 2020, and usually they're much busier than this. I like the simplicity of this. I like concept design 4, like others do as well. Although I don't feel the same way about removing the double arch bridge. To me, that's part of what makes it special. So that if that were to be removed, then I would not be a fan of it. Although I do agree with Manny that getting rid of the circle in the middle would be nice, even though it would just be a circle and not an O from far away. But I think that would be fine. And if I was forced to choose one more, then I would go with design concept 9 that has the double arches. If nothing else, then because I like how much more flat it is. Like you can imagine it on a pin. You can imagine it in like various places, more so than concept design 7 has like this highlight running through it. It's a similar idea, but it's a little bit too cute for what it's trying to be. I want something that's a little bit more understated and serious, even though it's playful. And this to me is simple, which denotes something a little bit more playful and yet serious. To me, we're trying to hold this concept of being old in history, but young in spirit. We have it on the signs all over the village. And to me, something like concept 9 speaks to that. That's it.
Okay, 2, 4, 9. Okay. And I think in that order. All righty. So if you go back to the top, I actually like number 4. And I have been the biggest anti the double arch, but it was based on a different rendition, which to me was exactly what's available. And by the way, not only in the town, but in other places. We've used it on marketing initiatives and all that. And one could argue, great, because it's used so much, that is exactly what you should use it for. For me, there are different municipalities and they're an identifier. And if you have to do it, you could argue we shouldn't have different municipalities, but we have 2 different municipalities. And therefore, I actually wanted to differentiate, to Bob's point, in this rendition and in the modern ones later on, which is why I asked if we own all of them. I can envision so many of the very modern ones, including number 9, to be used on major initiatives with long legs as an identifier, because to me, the double bridges are used in such a different way. So I am not like somehow morally opposed to double bridges or anything like that. I just don't want it to look like some other logo when that's so close and within, for a different reason than what Trustee Lopez said, actually. So I could see these being used, but number 4 for me works. I have to say that the colors don't work for me as much, Brian, because when you go to different treatments, to me, they blur a little bit. And I'm trying to figure out which font really works well. I think about why people live in villages. So that's my starting point. We all have different points, right? Some people want history, modern, whatever. For me, it's why do people move to villages? Why do they stay in villages? And number 4, if you can move it to number 4, Maddie. And I think that may be why it speaks, is not as modern. But in this case, to be perfectly honest, the sailboats in the background, the beauty of it differentiates. I happen to like the O because I do think that in different renditions, it looks like an O, therefore the Austining. I don't love this font. I forgot what it's called. I guess it says it here. Fonts we could discuss, I think, for 100 years, if not 100 hours. I leave that to you. There's no end to that. I'm not in love totally with the color. I don't hate it. It doesn't resonate with me, but I happen to like the bridge in this. I like the flow of it. I like the trees. It actually looks like our village for real. It captures, depending on where you stand in the village, it actually is what it looks like. And it makes us different than Croton and Peekskill and all the river towns. It's actually quite different because you even captured the angle. Not even sure it's a 5-way intersection. It just feels like you captured that angle. So I happen to like this. It happens to be, even without me saying that, 3, actually everybody said it because even Bob did 3 and 4. So I like this from the point of view of a people perspective, not so much the logo design is much more forward looking, which is what Omar Lopez was talking about, which I totally get. So for me, this is my number 1 choice. If you can go through the rest of them, I think the other one that we looked at, I'm sorry, so this one, the Matisse thing, by the way, is beautiful. Sleepy Hollow at the church, they have Matisse windows, so I think it's a beautiful thing to bring in.
I
It's
think that's
total art.
Chagall they have.
No, there's 12 Chagalls and 1 Matisse.
Oh, okay.
So it just brought me to like, yeah, it's local. It's not our village, but it's a beautiful rendition. I just wanted to give you a shout out for the beauty of it. I don't actually want to choose this, and maybe we will choose it for something, maybe for arts or something else. If you can go to number 2, please, Maddie. That was just a PSA to tell you how beautiful it looked. We've got to use this for something, but I agree with Omar. I would love to capture the architecture of the village. It's doesn't really work for me. So, and the modern pieces, I think are very logo-ish designed, and I actually feel seals should feel like I'm standing in them. And the modern ones don't make me feel like I'm standing in that, and number 4 does. So for me, I like them, almost all of them. I would love to find a way to use the Falcon one, and maybe we'll use it in initiative because it's very creative. It's not something that I ever thought of, and I don't think I think of Austining when I see it. I actually would just go with number 4. I would actually say that in that particular rendition, having the movement of the water, especially with the linking of our village through the Kill to the downtown that we're going to be working on, the housing projects going on, it actually feels that it has at least a 10 to 20-year shelf life, this logo, easily. I mean, I don't know if it has 90, but it has a real shelf life that would satisfy really almost anyone. And the only thing I don't like about the Falcon, honestly, I have looked at logo designs for municipalities. The use of animals and the use of people have become problematic. With the best of intentions, it just has. I don't know if things will change in 20 years, but even with the best, the American Eagle has become politicized. Animals and human faces and humans have just become so politicized that they've become problematic. This is Austining to me. So I'm going to just go with number 4. I'm sorry for the long explanation, but I wanted you, Brian, to understand, like in your design, I think it's important for you to in fact get a feel for why every trustee likes, dislikes, different pieces. I thought some of your modern ones actually looked like a big hug. So many of them look like you're really hugging someone with the way you brought in the bridges together. If people see that it's bridges, I mean, I'm not sure everybody will. So I think you got my input on this. We're
Thank
all
you.
equal, by the way, Brian. So, you got 5 opinions. This is recorded, so if you need to go back, I'm sure Maddie took notes. Did somebody write down everybody's, or do you want me to repeat them?
I wrote them down.
You got Dana, Bob, Manny, Omar, Rika, and you wrote down our preferences? Okay, then if you need it, I wrote it down. We can, I'm sure, discuss color. We could discuss whatever. I'm sure that members of the staff are going to tell you all the renditions that we need, whether it's social, whether it's, 6 by 4 feet signs and what they're done on and how you enlarge and all of that stuff. I'm sure they'll tell you how we're using everything, black and white and how it looks. I am, Brian, concerned about when, Matt, if you can bring that up a little bit so we can see the bottom part, which is his version. Right, keep going, keep going. So if you look at the grayscale reversed, if you look at the grayscale, where do you have the, oh, okay. I don't know which one you would use for a website in low resolution. What do you use in low resolution? Which one of these on a website?
Well, it's interesting you zeroed in on this. I believe for some reason the PDF did not render correctly.
Okay.
Because on color on dark, the second one from the left, those lines should be white.
Well, it may not be visible against the white background, which may be the problem. I leave that to you, but clearly how it looks on a
This
truck.
one is the most fragile as far as rendering in smaller sizes. It's delicate, and if number 4 seems to be the one design that everyone likes part of anyway. So the fragility is going to have to be refined so it does render better at smaller sizes.
Okay.
How I do that, I'm not sure yet, but I will.
Well, you're probably going to have to take some of your detailed lines out. My guess is, only because I've worked on this stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Be that as it may, if when you do that, I leave it to you to say, man, it's not going to work. Website, obviously social is going to be an important aspect. And believe it or not, police cars and garbage trucks and how it looks, because that's where you see a lot of this stuff, also matters. So those are your 2 sort of key data points, I think, for your test grounds. So unless somebody else has something to add, maybe from staff, I don't know, that we've left off. I don't know on this one where you're putting Village of Ossining or Ossining Village, because it's not so clear to me that that's complete, but that may be something else you need to add. I'll leave it to Dana or Bob, somebody to tell us what the next steps are, or Brian, like when would we see your next rendition? Because you did ask us for 4 and we gave that to you.
Well, do you want to just focus on this one and have different versions of this one? He could do one without the double arch bridge that just shows the way Main Street kind of swoops down, or he could, I mean, he could probably, if this is what we're all gravitating to, and I can certainly, agree on this one. Would you rather see 4 versions of this, or is that going to be more productive and a better use of his time than working on others that we're just not going to have an agreement on?
I think I'm gonna echo what you said. I'd like to see 4 versions with the little circle in it, without the little circle, without the bridge, and maybe with incorporating Village of Ossining around it, or somehow, this way we're not doing 4 different types and 4 different versions of 4 different types. I think we've pretty much narrowed it down, unless someone disagrees, to this number. This is number 4, I believe, right? Number 3.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right. And that gives you the opportunity. Yeah. Because every one of us said 4. A couple of you said 9.
Yeah.
Dana said 9 is a 5th choice.
I think if we do, some versions of with what he's heard tonight and comes back to us, and we go from there. Colors are, that's last on the blip screen for me. If he wants to throw colors, like I'm looking at this, seeing underneath the bottom bridge, I'm presuming that's the Kilbrook going through there. If you want to do a color version of that, with maybe some water or color blue, whatever, I don't know. You can go 100 different ways here. I'm not
Yep.
an artist, so I think I can agree to this version with a bunch of different other versions with all the ideas that we talked about tonight.
Right, so Brian, instead of 4, you're getting majority on, well, everybody agreed on, has at least said they like this one. So focus on this and maybe give us 2, 3, 4, whatever. Instead of 4 different treatments, do this in a few ways or 4 ways, however you want to do the math.
Okay,
Does that work?
that's fine. Concept 2 is the second most popular one.
Yeah, can we go back to number 2? I just want to
What
remind
if we
us.
did number 2 with different colors?
That was Dana and Omar that was the second with different colors. Yeah. Thanks, Omar. I didn't know what it reminded me of. As soon as you said it, I realized what it reminded me of. Yeah.
I mean, I like it because I personally haven't seen a seal that looks like this. And I think it speaks to our history. It speaks to our determination to preserve, our architectural, our downtown really is, as much as the double arch, I think very symbolic for us. And, I wouldn't mind seeing this in another colorway, but if that's, if other people are dead set against it, I'm not going to go, I want us to really, use Brian's time productively and well. So.
Right. All right. So we're going back to this and sort of going back to the 5 of us. If I may, I don't believe that I've seen this either. I think it's cool. The colors maybe need a change. For me, it does speak Ossining. I was going to say that, but then realized by the time it got to be my turn, everybody already said 4, and that was my first choice. There was no reason for me to go beyond it. I don't know. Let's just make sure we're all good with this because it's a seal that has to be in place for, I'm going to call it 20 to 30 years or so. So let's, I'm not rushing people. I also know we can spend all night. It goes oscillates from one way to the next. Anybody want to bring this back up or are we staying with 4?
I'm good with 4.
Good with 4 as well.
Okay. I mean, I'm okay with also having Brian, who had said he would do more than 1, to see what he comes up with this just as a difference. And we might use this for something else. New Rochelle, when they did work, and I think I'd mentioned this, for all of their marketing and business development, they use NR. They use the letters NR in a very modern way. They use it in some cases for their marketing and all that, and for seal, like on contracts, RFPs, and stuff like that. The garbage trucks, the sanitation trucks, and some of the other stuff, they use a much more traditional looking seal. So I do want to say that, we have opportunity. We don't have to be just on one thing. I'm just bringing this to the surface so that we all feel good about what we're doing and that we're able to, as Omar had said, if people ask, say, these are the choices we made, here is why we made them. And we can use them on other things. So I'm just saying, and does anybody else, I actually like this. I wouldn't mind, Brian, if it's still within your contract, to just have you work a little bit on this and see what we come up with. And spend a lot of effort on number 4. I mean, because that's sort of the weight of the board of where we're. Does that work for you and still within your contract?
Sure. So,
and if it isn't, you just let Stuart know and he'll get back to us because I want to stay within our contract. I don't want to, I don't want to abuse your time. It's valuable.
I think the way the original contract was framed, I was to present 4 concepts at this point.
Right.
I felt once I got into the process that I had more ideas than 4. And I could not presume the first 4 ideas I came up with were going to be the strongest ideas from your perspective. So I continued and came up with more. And I'm glad I did because I'm not sure I would have chosen 4 if in the first, concept 4 as one of the first 4 designs. Doesn't mean I don't like it. It's just I have a different perspective. I have different reasons for liking things. but I'm not the one making the choice. My intent was to give you a broad array of options and let you debate it. And may the best design win.
Well, this is the beauty of having one of our own, if you will, and hiring someone, because you may not be saying it, but what I hear is that you gave us more than you might have. And I sense that you also like this village a lot and you want to get something really great out there. So I very much appreciate your artistic intent. I would just say it's close enough that we look at a couple of things for number 2 and focus a lot of energy on number 4, because that is the one that all 5 people agreed on. But just to have a little bit of a balance, maybe we use it in a different way. As I said, New Rochelle certainly ended up doing that, where they use a seal and a logo. And then they're very clear about when they use each of them, gives us some options. And they're so different in some ways. So if you could do that, that would be very much appreciated. And I think
I can do that.
And that
No, I
brings
forgot
common
to
ground.
mention, when I was introducing Brian, Brian, you're born and raised in Ossining, right?
Well, I was born in the Bronx, but I moved here, I guess, when I was about 1. And I went through the school system, kindergarten to high school. And right after high school, I went professional. I had bypassed college and went straight into the professional commercial art industry. Started out with IBM, and I've worked with a lot of international companies. I currently am working with PepsiCo, Nestle, Penguin Random House, Unilever, Kraft, AT&T. In addition
The point
to,
I was trying to make was that you come at this with a love of the village yourself.
well,
So
yes, I do.
You're from here,
Yes, I don't have the same aversions to certain things that other people do. I didn't have a big problem with the Indian. I wasn't crazy about the rendition of it because it was not accurate to the Native Americans in this part of the world. But as far as I have a vested interest in what you choose and how I render it, because I too will have to stare at it for a long time. Every time a garbage truck goes by, I got to see that thing and I have to know that I did the best I could to make it as effective and as strong a piece of work as I could. I want the community to be proud of it. I want them to be proud of having it on their stationery, on their trucks and vehicles, and on their banners. I want it to promote pride.
I appreciate that. And I see that coming through, and that was my point. It's obvious to me. So thank you very much, Brian. And thank you, folks. You asked us to give you direction for next
Thank
steps,
you.
and
Thank you.
we did.
I have my marching orders.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Yeah. Thank you.
You can always stay for the rest of the meeting. Most people, not us, we find them totally fascinating. For some reason, not everybody shares our enthusiasm. So thank you for joining us though for tonight.
Thank you all.
Thank you, and run while you can.
Okay, our next topic is the 5-way intersection in the middle of town, the village rather. We have our Director of Public Works here to talk about the intersection basically at Spring Street and Main Street. This is something that the village has been looking at for some time. Village Board has directed us to move forward with ideas with plans to bring this intersection up to date. And with that, I will turn it over to Paul Fraioli to give you a little bit of history, where we were, where we're at, and what the process will be to move this forward.
Hi, Paul.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Karen. I think Maddie or Jamie, I think Jamie, if maybe just so I have something to talk to, if you want to just do a that rendering that we had from this concept back in 2015, that would.
Paul, do you know what we discussed in the first meeting we had as a trustee in November of 2015?
Yes. Well, we go at, you know, some things we, you know, do quickly and some things we take our time.
Actually, we should always take our time, to be honest with you, when it comes to making major changes. I'm happy to be discussing this. That wasn't a comment that it took so long. It's a comment that
I get it.
I find it like, it's sort of ironic to me. It's, you know.
So just to talk to the rendering up there before I get into the history and the intro that Karen referenced. This is a aerial view with north being the top of the screen, south being Spring Street. To the right, you have Main Street, and to the left, you have Main Street. And on the top of the screen, again, that's Brandreth. And if you made that left behind the building, that's Central Avenue. So I think everybody knows where we are there now, with the big reference points really marked square there on the right.
I just want to remind people they're looking at 2015. It wasn't because that parking lot you see sort of at the top there. That's not what it looks like today. People who have moved here recently may not realize that.
Actually, even in 2015, the building was there, but I think the planimetric view there that the architect,
right,
engineer pulled was
yeah.
was a little dated, and you know, had the old parking lot there,
right,
where we had the fire some time ago.
Yeah, just when people look at the video, I just want to be clear that this is where it's from. I know you said it, I just want to reiterate. Go ahead.
So Karen and I discussed resurrecting this a little bit. As you know, the conversation started after the 2021 discussions on the 2022 capital budget. So in the capital budget, we did have money that would be considered a like use, and Karen and I discussed it with our treasurer, who is on the line with us this evening as well. We have the comprehensive street and curb maintenance budget, which has a couple of facets to it, but it adds to roughly $1 million. And the corridor study is another item funded in the comprehensive street and curb maintenance capital budget for $3 million, but that's a standalone project to some extent. I'll talk about that later. And the CDBG ADA sidewalk grant that I think was presented at a meeting a couple of weeks ago has a $200,000 match for a $400,000 total project for the Spring Street streetscape capital project through CDBG. Essentially repairing the sidewalks and adding some streetscape beautification to Spring Street from this intersection down to Lafayette, which is essentially half of Spring Street. The other half we look to complete following that project. That's being done in conjunction with CDBG in Westchester County as the administrator of that grant. And in speaking with them, they anticipate them performing the design work after the survey is done, and something that we probably would not be able to put out on the street for public bidding until 2023 at the earliest. In advance of that, we're doing a CDBG project on James Street, which they think they're going to get the design to us in time for a summer fall 2022 project. But again, that remains to be seen. County planning, just like everybody else, had COVID issues and some delays associated with that. So I'll keep you posted as that moves along. So getting back to this project, by way of introducing it, back in 2013, there was a Nelson Nygaard study that was completed as part of a subcontracted effort to the comprehensive plan that was being done at that time. Part of that study changed Spring Street to a two-way street off of Main Street in that section. And on the heels of that, the discussion to facilitate an appropriately designed left turn onto that two-way street and improved ADA and pedestrian requirements for that intersection got the board thinking about a improvement to that 5-corner intersection. So in roughly 2015, that culminated in a concept plan, which you kind of see an artist rendering here, but there was other contract drawings put together that were, you know, a little not as fancy as this. So I thought this was better to talk to. The plan at that time in 2015 was presented to the board with the understanding to advance it to construction documents. Obviously, that got sidetracked a little bit to investigate another direction, but at the time, the 5-corner intersection that was presented was essentially taking the 5-way and turning it into a 4-way intersection, a little more traditional intersection for ADA and pedestrian access and safety by bumping out the existing areas now, if you go down there, that are indicated with paint and the reflective candlesticks, if you will, are in the road. Because essentially everybody was already crossing from the northeast corner to the northwest corner, where there was no crosswalk and no pedestrian safety measures put into place. So what we have out there now is really just, you know, unfortunately, it's been for the last 7 years, but it was a temporary endeavor to keep people as safe as possible while we did a formal design. But this is, it is still is essentially the template for the formal design, which at the time we wanted to further develop into construction documents. And in those construction documents, we looked to, without encroaching on any of the village-owned parcels, that being Market Square and then the post office parking lot, we looked to limit our impact on parking, make ADA accessibility and pedestrian safety paramount in those 4 corners, and also make the traffic flow a little better than what they had now due to the requirement for a signalized intersection that included a time period for Brandreth and Central Avenue, both 2-way streets, to enter that intersection. Again, we didn't take the design too far along, further than what you see here. And the largest component of the rehabilitation was really not what you see on paper here, but the actual signal itself, because there's a lot of antiquated instrumentation out there in that present box for the signals. The signal heads are old, the instrumentation is older, and any of the pedestrian access measures that we have out there now are outdated and antiquated as well, and really don't meet today's standards if we're going to design this to meet uniform traffic control and DOT standards right now for everything that goes along with what I've discussed so far. So I made a call to the engineer that was working with us. He's still with the firm. The firm has since been purchased by a larger conglomerate, but you know, he still has all the old records and they're still in the same office. They're really just really the same office, but under a different umbrella now as a traffic consulting engineering firm. And I told him that the board was looking to resurrect and further the intersection to really finish off and bring to bid specifications the original concept design. So in speaking with Karen, before we went out and solicited another proposal for him to pick up where he left off and do the things that I had presented in 2015, we really wanted to bring it back to you and discuss the the implications of doing that. One being, we would need to pull the money for that project from an existing capital bond that we have in our capital budget, which I discussed a little bit earlier. And we do think that for the scope that Karen and I discussed, we could complete the intersection rehabilitation for less than $1 million. And we have $1 million in that appropriate bond now. The other is to see if there was anything collateral or different or additional to this scope outside of the creation of this more traditional four-way crossing, including the signal rehabilitation, that you might be interested in incorporating into this project. And I'll give you a couple of examples. When Karen and I were discussing it, you guys were having separate meetings, and in those meetings, there was discussions on, like right-of-way placemaking, like maybe you want to have some gathering areas kind of just off of this main hub that we might be able to incorporate into this project. Or there might be, traffic flow concerns that you had that, might want to be discussed in concert with, the police and fire departments input with regard to like Branderth and Central Avenue. And we need to, keep in mind what we're doing here has a ripple effect up the street a little bit, because we're making some changes up there with the Route 9 corridor study and the Church Street intersection. We're turning into more of a boulevard detail with 2 lanes versus the 3, and how people are coming off Highland Avenue and turning on the Main Street is going to, we're presenting some changes to the DOT with how people are going to come down Main. Again, we have internal meetings where we discussed parking and, the parking on Main Street and how that might be impacted by some type of permanent parklets that we have now with creation of Jersey barriers. Maybe we'll look to do something as, similar to what we're doing for the pedestrian bump outs that you see now to make crossing easier. Maybe we have some bump outs along Main Street somewhere in close proximity to this intersection. And the reason I'm saying to incorporate all that now, because it is really my vision to, once this is all completed and all the new concrete curbs are put in place and all the subsurface work is completed, is to overlay the entire area in blacktop versus the concrete detail, and do all the appropriate street markings, because I think that's really the aesthetically the nicer look when it's done properly. And I think it also proves to be the best surface to put the paint or thermoplastic that we actually use for marks on the road for pedestrian safety and traffic safety. So in short, we didn't want to proceed until we really got everybody's druthers incorporated into the project. So we didn't want to solicit a proposal from the engineer and bring that to you, only to find out that that's really not what you had in mind. You really thought it was something more like this. So we'd rather get that now, then I would go back to the engineer and give you a proposal with that firm that incorporates the effort that you were looking for.
Okay. Paul, I will say that in 2015, it was 350,000 to about 500,000, depending. There were a couple of renditions. It's under $1 million now. 7 years later, did I do the math right? Yeah.
I'm not sure. Karen referenced that number earlier. I don't remember saying anything close to 350. I mean, I know the signal and instrumentation itself is probably $300,000.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying. I remember that discussion with the roundabout, because the numbers were supposed to be cheaper for the roundabout was one of the reasons some of the board members went with that, and then it just kept going up. The point is, it makes sense that over 7 years, whether it's 350 or 450, that it makes sense that that's where we are now. It makes sense for a lot of things that over 7 years, things go up. So it sounds like overall reasonable. I'm going to just sort of go through the gallery and see what people think before I give my thoughts. I mean, my suggestion is that we sort of state a couple of the top line, not like inch by inch, but a couple of top line things that some of us think or thought we were going to see over time, that would like to see, some of our concerns based on both being residents here and speaking to businesses and hearing over the past few years issues raised by our constituents, and just share those with you so that would drive some of this process. And looking at it is helpful because it reminds us of certain things. So Manny, since you mentioned before you're the oldest trustee, you're clearly not, but thank you for stepping up, but you're the oldest serving and you've been through this a lot. You want to just kick it off so we can just create a list for Paul so that, you know, we could just refresh and some things that you'd like to see, because otherwise we could be here for hours. Like, what are the key things that are super important based on conversations you've had and your own thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor. Just appreciate that. And yeah, it was seems like a short time, but it was 2015. And Paul, just a point of clarification, it wasn't 2013 comprehensive plan. It was actually the one 2009 part of the comprehensive plan that was some of the guidelines that made the board that I was part of it at the time make the changes on the one-way intersection for Spring Street section of Spring Street. That was only a one-way before, prior to that.
But
you know,
Manny, before you start, may I just add this, because I think it might help the direct the conversation or the input from the board. Yes, 2009 for the comp plan. 2013 was like an offshoot of that for Nelson Nygaard to turn it into the one-way, which was a comp plan recommendation based on the RFP recommendations for the post office lot, because that pass-through road there is actually a paper road, and that was really done in concert with what they envisioned at the time as being development of those two lots. So these are all things that I didn't just mean, like, if you thought the good idea would be to kind of rehabilitate the Christmas tree corner with something a little more ornate. It wasn't just that. I mean, you really also have to get our arms around the direction on what we want to do with do we want to make this part of a DRI project? And if we do, there's certain parameters that we have to follow to make sure that it's funded through DRI. And do we want to make the two lots part of the DRI project? Because if you do that, then it's really has to be done again in concert with what might happen to that post office lot. Because if that post office lot is developed or Market Square is developed with some type of vehicle interface, or we create that paper road that exists in the post office lot now as an actual lane of traffic, or some type of vehicle access for whatever ends up on that post office lot, it's going to have a direct impact on the design of this intersection. So we don't want to design and make it all pretty with time period bollards and beautiful powder coated signal mast arms, only to find out that we have to redo it again if someone develops the lot in 5 years. All right, now I'm done, and I will.
I mean, we can have that conversation too, Manny. What are your key things that you would like to see, timing, etc.? Because this is the whole thing is a domino effect, as Paul started with. You can't lock up this whole place and not have a road that anybody can use because you're working on 3 projects simultaneously and realize, hey, now nobody could get through the downtown at all. I mean, there are all these variables, like a big domino thing. One falls down, it hits all the others, and it paralyzes boards in dealing with this. Let's not be paralyzed. Let's talk about our top line requests and let the experts go on and see how close they can get to it. What are your requests? What are your suggestions? What are your thoughts, please?
Yeah, and those mine are very, very few, if any. In regards, just looking at that in a prismatic way, just looking at the intersection and the project that we're seeing right now that is presented to us, or we already went through the challenges in 2015 when we were looking at this particular option at that time. prior to the other option that we had. My recollection, Paul, and probably correct me if I'm wrong, the design drawings, I want to say the construction documents, I want to say there were more than 50% at least on this phase for this particular concept. We already had addressed a lot of the parking elements. We were relocating the fire hydrant from the current location to another location so we can gain some additional parking spaces. So in relationship to parking, I think we were going to stay the same, more or less. Paul, you muted.
Yeah, no, I thought I clicked to put it in. Okay, you're correct. The parking near the fire hydrant on that crosshatch on the northeast corner there, we were going to relocate that as part of the project. Actually, in advance of either direction, whatever we did in this intersection, we talked about the worst case parking loss, and that's what spurred on the improvements that we did in-house to the post office parking lot, where we kind of knocked out that green space there and created those like 18 additional spots there and along the old exit from that parking lot along Main Street. So we created roughly 20 additional parking spaces that offset basically fivefold the potential spots that you would lose with the with either of the designs.
Yeah, thank you. So parking is not, I don't want to say it's not an issue, but it's not a concern at this time because that was addressed then, and I think it has worked so far with what we have. To answer the other question that you mentioned, or the concern that you mentioned, is what is going on Highland Avenue, sure, and what happens in there. I think since that we are working in conjunction with that concept, these two projects have to be worked out almost at the same time, I want to say. And I don't know which project will go first, but the lights and whatever the traffic that we're going to affect either or, we need to make sure that if we start with this intersection, we have to make sure we incorporate the impact that's going to have the project on Highland Avenue as well. All right, so I'm not sure how the coordination is going to happen. In relationship to the paper space, paper street within itself, that was never a concern, in my recollection, on any of the options that we had at that time when we were looking at, what could be built at those sites, at that particular site. I think it's not a concern for me either now. What is a concern is what we were trying to accomplish when we're talking about this particular project, because we did talk about pedestrian safety at around Maple Street. And I believe, and Paul, again, correct me if I'm mistaken, when we're talking about this, we also ask you to look into what can we do to extend this project into Maple Street area, so we can address a lot of concerns of the seniors and all that traffic that happens on that corners, on those corners itself, where the paper street sort of kind of meets and doesn't meet, sure. So I believe that is some of the highlights that I remember. I mean, looking at this, I don't see anything else besides the coordination, obviously, with the police and the fire department, make sure all that stuff is being addressed with this concept, if that's what we're going to be moving forward. But I don't have anything else additional, Mayor. I think a lot of the stuff we already ironed out on 2015 at that time.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. Manny. Go ahead.
They made the Maple Place component I think you're referring to is the crosswalk. The crosswalk from Maple Place to the post office parking lot. So people who, they do cross there to go to the post office often. And we're looking to create a safer place for them to do that. There's a lot of crossing that happens there. Plus people do park in like the other side of that at the drugstore parking area and walk across the street to like the grill and the market there. So a crosswalk there would be advantageous. And if it wasn't part of this, we also were going to make it part of the Spring Street rehabilitation. So one way or another, it's going to get incorporated into something we do in the next few years, for sure. It's on the radar. And that was one of the areas where we lost some of the parking. We lost parking for a potential crosswalk, and then we lost parking when we made Spring Street two ways, because there was some parking along the west side of the road there, if you're looking at this picture. That's why we made all the additional parking in the parking lot and on Main Street.
Okay. Anybody want to go next?
Yeah,
Okay.
I could go. Well, just looking at the rendering, coming out of, I'm gonna say Central Avenue, that yellow car that's sitting there. This is where you want to create it to be a four-way versus it being five-way like it is now? Am I understanding that correctly? I'm seeing that car parked there. And the reason I asked that question is if there's cars or traffic there and an apparatus needs to get around that corner, looking at this, it's not that it's impossible, but you also have apparatus as of now coming to, hopefully not for long, coming off of Central Avenue. Just navigating that corner, hitting Brandon is nothing, but me personally driving a 47-foot tower ladder, making that left turn with traffic sitting there. I don't know, is that the intention there, or maybe I'm just talking too much?
No, in fact, the roughly, because I'm not going to say this is to scale, but roughly the bump outs there that you have now to make that a soft, an easier two-lane crossing where that yellow car is parked, instead of crossing down and then crossing back over and coming back up, which is where the old crosswalks used to be painted.
Right.
Those bump outs are what are marked now by the reflective candlesticks, and
Right.
they're negotiating that turn now. The Westchester County bus negotiates that turn now that goes
Yeah.
down Central.
No, I agree to that point, but what I'm seeing is this car with a stop line. Is that car coming out of Central? Is that where Central is going to come to a stop line, or are they going to be back where they are now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'll have to check. I think we can't peek around the building with this one, but I think there is an additional stop bar on Central, so it
Okay.
kind of allows someone coming off Brandon to coming on Central to determine who's going to go to that four-way intersection first.
Right, okay. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds with this. That was just something I just noticed as looking at the rendering. The only other thing that I bring up and is the left turn coming down Main Street to Spring Street. Timing issue, is there something that, you could sit there for 2 to 3 light cycles as far as, especially if there's eastbound traffic coming up Main Street and they're sitting out in the middle of an intersection, nobody can get around, and you could sit in front of the open door for at least 2 light cycles. Is there something that can be accomplished timing wise? Because I highly doubt anybody's going to agree to making Spring Street back to one way. Yeah, do we gain parking there? Yes, if it goes back to one way. But these are my take on it. I'm just concerned about, especially with tying it into the road diet, that yes, it's a little harder approach into Main Street the way what we're seeing in the road diet with the bump out up on the top there by 205 or 207 Main, where they're going to bump it out a little bit. So it's a little harder approach, so people aren't as aggressive coming into Main Street. But that left turn concerns me just for timing. And if there's something that can be accomplished where it could be bled out certain ways, then I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with Spring Street being 2 ways. But those are the only couple things that really stand out. Overall, it's long overdue. I agree we need to be in concert with what our visions are for the Market Square lot and the post office lot. So I agree 100% with you on that. And that's basically all I have.
All right. So the two main things from Trustee Fritchie, I got all the points, but the two main ones were, the impact of the 2-way that it had on the parking on Spring Street. I think we lost 3, maybe 4 spaces And only because we have the right turn lane and the straight and left turn lane, which took away the ability to have the parking there. It needed to make room for the southbound lane on traffic. But once you get down to the cleaners, right after the pharmacy there, you know, then you go back to having parking on both sides of the street because you only have one lane in each direction. So right past Maple Place, if you will, you're back to parking on both sides of the street. And because of the apron for the post office lot, you really only lost like 3 or 4 spaces along that area there, which we made up on Main Street when we closed the exit from the post office lot that used to exist there. And then we created some more when we covered up that green space that you see on the drawing there now. The left turn lane is really that's like the, you know, that's the big benefit of the intersection redesign to facilitate the two-way, is that by making it 4-way, it would give us the ability to put in a timed left-hand turn arrow, or maybe even a designated left turn lane to go along with that arrow. So when you do have that, you would be able to prevent that queuing that you referenced when you were talking about, you know, cars coming in both directions, particularly during rush hour. So yeah, the left turn lane was going to benefit greatly by this layout versus trying to still maintain the 5-way intersection.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Folks, Dana or Omar, any additional comments, thoughts, questions,
nothing for me.
etc.? Okay, Dana?
Yeah, I have a question in terms of the signals that are there. Would you keep those the same big, you know, apparatus signal things, but you would just change the timing? Would you put an all new signal? What do you call them? Cobras? What do you call those signal?
The traffic
lights, no?
The traffic signals, traffic lights?
Yeah, the whole
The
thing.
mast arms that are supporting them and the,
Yeah.
So it was, this is a good segue into some of the aesthetics associated with the project that really, you know, will need your input. You know, I'll put together what I think would look nice, but you know, I'm only one person, and you know, there's going to be some flexibility. I just envisioned when we first laid this out to have some like time period mast arms with maybe some black powder coated fluted stanchions with a powder coated black mast arm to look a little more, you know, I don't want to say historical, but that's what I want to say, with the appropriately sized and designed LED fixtures within that. I envisioned bollards on these pedestrian safe haven bump outs to prevent, you know, but decorative bollards similar to what you see in a lot of places down in New York City. You know, you have those black, again, fluted bollards. You know, we're not looking to do like a polished steel detail here. I think some of the older ones that you see, I know that I've seen them a lot down in Times Square to prevent any vehicle pedestrian issues. It will make the island safe for people to stand on when they're getting ready to cross the road. And obviously some, you know, appropriate landscaping in a lot of the areas that, you know, are bumped out and are, you know, being created there for, you know, to have an aesthetic component without impacting any sight distance issues for the vehicles or blocking pedestrian sight or make pedestrians less noticeable. Everything would be appropriately planted, but definitely have some green sprinkled into the design as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that. Actually, Dana, thank you for that question. Actually, we talked about that as well in 2015, and that was one of the things that we had it in mind that the price obviously was going to be a little bit higher because of that. And also my recollection at that time, Paul, was that some of the stuff when we have, and I think you had some samples, if I'm not mistaken, of what could look like. My ask in 2015 was the same ask that I'm going to ask now is, you know, this is part of the downtown. And not that we have to go in front of the Historic Preservation Commission, but, you know, I think it will be nice to kind of let them know what we are thinking of doing and what kind of elements are we doing, just to get some feedback, if anything, from them as well, because this part, or at least portion of this, is part of the historic district. So
Yeah, I remember that. We had a discussion, and I believe you're correct in saying that historical preservation is relative to building facades and not right-of-way improvements. However, because we're respectful and do want their input to see, from their, their professional position on historical structures, how we can incorporate a design that is really in concert with the building facades that we're looking to maintain.
thank you.
Okay. So my asks are as follows. And I always thought that this project was actually about redoing all the lights. I thought that was like one of the key elements of redoing this is the outdating streetlights and the fact that in the walkways, because right now there isn't even a don't walk where that yellow car is, because that's not the way that it's designed now. So for me, all the lighting fixtures, the lights, the timing of them, putting in the most modern for the next 20 to 30 years is the key element here, not the concrete, but actually the ADA stuff for walkability. I've always loved that because when I had to walk around with a stroller with 2 kids, I was very grateful for all the ADA stuff, because while they're not designed for women with little children who are pregnant, they're actually very useful. And we have a lot of, we want to be very cognizant of people aging in place, and also young families and walkability in the village. It's good for the businesses. It's good for everything. So I like this 4-way thing. I like the Spring Street. I'd like to add a couple of things. I'm not as concerned about 2 parking spots here and there, because we focus a lot about it. The truth is, since 2015, we've had an increase in the population. So whether you give up 2 spaces or create 20 spaces, it's not moving the needle. And we're spending a lot of time over something that doesn't move the needle in either direction. We're going to have an increase of 1.5% in our population just by building the affordable housing at the waterfront, which is at the bottom of the hill. And that will create some parking, but probably never enough. So to me, it doesn't move the needle. So the parking piece, to Manny's point, I'm not sure. While people focus on it, we have other projects for it. For me, it's the mobility of humans around this. So that's more business benefit. So that and it's not just the pandemic just informed, I think, us that we need gathering places, outdoor places. This is in concert with the DRI projects. To your question, the 2 lots may be part of DRI, but I doubt that we're changing the road system. I doubt we're going to do that. I'd like this to be a high priority. Paul, you asked how this fits in with the road diet. This to me is actually if I told you my top 5 for mayor, this would be like number 1 or 2. And the board has actually stated that, just to put a perspective on it. I love the bump outs. To Bob's point, I'm not sure they can be bumped out more, but if we can create sitting areas, whether it's for events, whether it's for the restaurants to have more seating areas, more places for people to gather, that would be great. I don't know if it could be any bigger than the way it is now. So I leave the engineers to worry about all the coordination. I would suggest what we didn't see in the past on Main Street. What I observe, just as a resident here, is the number of illegal U-turns to try to catch a parking spot as you come down on Main Street. People U-turn right in the middle, causing, frankly, I just can't believe we haven't had more accidents. And so I'd like to actually see the use of landscaping. Respectfully, I have, as I've said before, I've got 2 daughters with engineering degrees, but I'm going to tell you that we need somebody who's involved in landscaping and environmental. I'm not worried about the historical aspect, because you got lots of people looking at that in this village. We're a village that looks at its history, at historical viewpoints, so I know you're on top of that. What I'm concerned about is the decreased amount of green space. that will be caused by this, which already has been caused by some of this. So I'm very concerned about using plants and landscaping to create space for people and to prevent people, if you continue down on Main Street, you can't see it in the picture, it's blocked. By continuing some of the landscaping from what we already have would prevent people from, with some walkways, would prevent them from making U-turns. It would prevent people from speeding and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just encouraging the use of an arborist or a landscaping person to use, you know, nature to help us in both beautifying, in water management, and a whole bunch of other things, which we did not discuss in 2015, but we have to discuss going forward. I don't want to sit here in this meeting and go through it, but it's either somebody from EAC who has expertise or somebody from Keller or somebody has to be on this team. Greener, the better.
We can incorporate maybe a subcontracted landscape architect into the contract that I'm looking to resurrect with the previous engineer. And I think, and being that they just got absorbed, they might even have someone like that already on staff.
Right.
But I'll definitely look into that and make that a component of the proposal when I bring it forth.
Right, and we can get into the details of how one uses gardens and all that. This is a huge balancing act. That's why engineers run this stuff. Everything affects everything. And it gets to the point where, as I said earlier, we become paralyzed because it becomes a whole huge chicken and egg discussion. But the only way you get out of that is to just get moving and put a stake in the ground and understand that in 7 years or 9 years, there may be one piece that maybe we shouldn't have done because now we have to take it apart because some DRI project was created but this is why we're still discussing something we discussed in 2015, because there's always something else that comes up. And they're all good decisions. They're all okay. But it's time to do this part of the village. And it's time to also support the businesses. It's time to support, there are more people. You could see in this picture from well, this is not even the way it really looked. It looked actually worse than this. There are more people living on top of stores, more people walking, lots of movement. So that's what we have to look at. So for me, it's improvement of all the lights and the ADA stuff. It's making sure that landscaping isn't a second or third thought, but a first thought, and using it the way you would use concrete. The bump outs are like ugly concrete. Like that's an example of where somebody needs to be a little bit more creative. We talked a lot about parking in 2015. We now have 2 studies that deal with parking. Let those solve some of the solutions and how we do that. Let us look at this for how people walk around, drive around. And it doesn't bother me personally, but I think it bothers others that people have to wait a little bit longer because it's a middle of a village. People shouldn't be going fast. People shouldn't be maneuvering around. And there are other routes around the village that people can have to move around through. So for me, it's not as big of a concern, but I think it is for others. And I understand that the challenge is to take everybody's input into this. And we are going to have to look to the fire and the police, etc. But I think we already know that. So I think for me, this project should be moving forward. I don't think there's like a whole lot that's a mystery here, frankly. I really don't. This is not, to me, one of the, it's a big project. It's just, we're not rebuilding anything. We're taking what we have and improving it. It's, we should like be giving you a go ahead to start giving us, you know, to start doing RFPs, to start moving forward.
That's my question right now. What is our next step? Paul, what do you need to be the next step to get this revitalized and start moving on it?
So just to first recap what the facet that was Rika added was the beautification and the landscape incorporation into design. And yes, there are some really neat things we can do with concrete. Again, this was just a rendering, but there's really some pretty things, pretty aesthetically pretty things we can do with concrete, like design oriented things that will definitely soften that, and green space and stormwater measures will all be part of this. I will, so as far as next steps, what I'm hearing, and I'll coordinate with the manager's office the same, I'd like to kind of resurrect the old contract, because that's where a lot of the base work is done and all the surveying was done. So we have an economy of scale there, so to speak. It's already started. And enhance that contract to include some of the things I'm drawing from tonight. I'm comfortable with the budget that exists right now in the 2022 comprehensive street and curb maintenance budget. I will say that if we use that money versus DRI money, it's probably going to restrict the presently budgeted paving in other areas. We did get a lot of paving done during COVID, I will tell you that. We probably spent upwards of $1 million in the last, I'm going to say 2 years of COVID. We did a lot of roads that were out of the, the mainstream that were much needed, that were really not seen by a lot of the public because of where they were, like Lincoln Place, for example, and North Malcolm were paved, reconstructed in their entirety. Which is maybe not such a bad thing, because I think next summer Con Ed's going to be busy doing a lot of paving on our behalf, because right now we all know what they're doing to the village in a lot of areas. And, they're going to have all that road restoration going on next summer. So, maybe it's just better suited to use the money here. But to get that done this summer into fall, it's really going to have to be a pretty large effort to bring it to contract document and bidding stage in this time frame. But I think we can do it and still meet all the parameters that you threw out today, including incorporating, the HPC and some of those other components to the project. As long as this is the general scale, I think I could probably have a proposal internally in front of the manager within a couple of weeks, and then shortly thereafter on a board resolution where assuming this budget is okay to use, we can go. There also is an option where, and this is what I garnished from the DRI meeting that we had, if we do the design and we get it to shovel ready bid phase, and that just so happens to work with the DRI schedule of them pre-approving projects for funding, then it would really be silly for us not to try to take advantage of the DRI funding, because that's really, it is one of the listed projects. And if it turns out where the bidding is not in advance, or I say the award to a contractor is not in advance of the approval as a DRI project, then that's a good thing, because then we can just say, all right, it's an approved DRI project, we'll use your funding, and the $1 million we need for this intersection can be funded by DRI. But that's TBD. And I think the first step is for me to get a proposal and sit with Karen and Dale and kind of work out the internal logistics, and then come back to you at another work session with the consultant for you to give the green light.
So resurrecting the old contract definitely helped your timeline along.
Yeah, and also doesn't waste more money trying
Right.
to get that done by somebody else. I mean, some of the work was done. Okay, so I think that answers most of the questions here. I think we're good to go. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I just
Where are
want to add, I just want to add one more thing. A lot of the things that typically the pieces of the puzzle, the dominoes that fall, and all the considerations are falling into place at the same time. So it's giving us an ability to really move forward in a way that we don't have to worry about redoing different things. We do have the parking studies, we do have DRI and streetscaping the planning of that will align with the design of this project. So we'll be able to leverage a lot of different things, and I think mitigate the chances that we'll have to redo them And to Paul's point, it may be a way to leverage funding either from PRI or other sources as well. So the planets are aligning here too. I do want to say I went slightly out of order. So we're going to bring Dale on, our treasurer, to go over our capital project review and his request for a budget adjustment. So just a slight little
Oh, I
reorder
thought that
on
was
the-
a planned event. I didn't realize you went out of order. I mean, you went out
No,
of
it
order on the
was- it
agenda, but I
was-
thought there
it
was a
was-
reason for it. Okay.
You know, there was just so much excitement, I think, about reviving the Five Corners that I got carried away here. So,
Well, you know, pretty soon, if Paul has in 2 weeks to you, we're going to start calling it the Four Corners, apparently. So we'll
It's
just
like-
immediately change the entire branding of that corner.
intersection.
Yes.
But with that, certainly,
Okay. Hey, Dale.
no disrespect to our treasurer, but you're up now.
She probably had her
Mr.
dinner
Brennan.
and dessert while we were all talking. Right, Dale?
No, absolutely fascinating discussions going on tonight. Thank you very much, Manager DeSori. Good evening, Mayor and Village Trustees.
Hello.
I had sent out a memo, or actually the manager's office did for me. Thank you very much. Just encapsulating the resolutions I'd like to bring to the board next legislative session on February 2nd. These are just really a revisitation of all the capital projects that the board had approved with the adopted budget on December 2nd. And these projects were the ones that were slated to be funded from appropriated surplus fund balance. So essentially, small equipment items like the police cars, the cameras for the police cars, the fire department's line fire prevention, the radio upgrade for the fire department. There was one vehicle for the building department, 2 vehicles for the water department. This also covers our Microsoft Office 365 transfer over for the email, the firehouse generator at Cataract, paving at Vets Park, tennis court irrigation, and the Nelson Park Playground, and then the design and engineering for the Lakeville water tank. So in total for those projects, we're going to use $595,500 from the general fund, $540,000 from the water fund, and then $10,000 from the sewer fund. But just to visit a little bit on the side of the fund balance that we're using as surplus, when I did the schedule for the final budget printing, which actually we just received them today. So I will leave the physical copies down in the board office for everyone. But there's a schedule in the back of the final adopted budget that shows for the general fund, we're projecting putting back to fund balance around $967,000. For the water fund, 551, and for the sewer fund, 259,000. So we'll definitely be okay using these funds to fund these projects. Any questions on that portion? Okay, then we also had in the capital plan to fund 2 of the park projects from our in lieu of parkland funds. That was the roller hockey rink resurfacing for $35,000 and Snowden Park fencing for $25,000. So the in lieu of parkland funds, special purpose fund has a current balance of $130,000. So we're slating to use $60,000 of those funds for those 2 projects. And then for future discussion, as we move forward, we will be bringing bond resolutions as projects evolve and get ready, and we have better figures, just like the one that Paul just discussed in depth. So, but we will handle those as they come, because they will follow the flow of the bond resolution process. Any questions?
Are you at all concerned about where bond prices are going?
Not yet, because they really haven't fluctuated too much. I did have a conversation with one of our banking institutions who has said that rates are scheduled to increase 3 times this coming year. Whether the current COVID struggles, are going to affect that presumption is to be seen, because this was before that occurred. So, but at this point, not yet.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Thank you. So next week, we'll just have the official capital budget adjustments for your approval.
That's going to be the resolution for next week, Dale.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Treasurer Brennan. Our next topic is proposed changes to the CPCRB. And I would like to turn it over to Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan and Chief of Police Kevin Sylvester. Thank you.
Thank you, Village Manager. Good evening, folks. We've discussed this a lot, and we discussed it numerous times last year. So it is now proposed local law 1 of 2022. You've heard comments from me, you've heard comments from the chief. We don't have much more to add. So it's really what the board's intent is. If they want a resolution to call for a public hearing with regard to the proposed local law, it is the same as we discussed at the end of 2021.
Omar?
Yep. So
I was expecting, yeah, that was a pause for me because I thought that you were going to jump in. That's what I was waiting for.
No jumping. As chair of the meeting, I look for you to move the
Okay,
orchestra
Omar.
as you.
Yeah. After you're done with this, we're gonna have to have a discussion about the agenda. But let's get through this piece though.
Yeah, most of it is, I think, good. I want to elevate the pieces that were most contentious, particularly with folks on the CPCRB. One, and I Stuart, clarify actually if this isn't, I think this is in the local law 1, but is the language in the complaint form and having the language be changed to regarding false complaints to something that is not going to be discouraging to individuals making complaints. That's the line of thinking. Is that in local law 1, or is that something that is separate from the law?
Well, no, that language has not been changed, Trustee Lopez. What is still in here is the language that appears under the penal law, which would be on the complaint. And it is, a person is guilty of making a punishable false written statement when he knowingly makes a false statement which he does not believe to be true in a written instrument bearing a legally authorized form notice to the effect that false statements made therein are punishable. Making a punishable false written statement is a Class A misdemeanor. That would be on every written complaint form.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I want to lift that up as a question. I know that I've had conversations with some folks on the board. Is that something that we want to change to something like what's in the Albany form? Something like, I hereby affirm that the foregoing information is true and complete to the best of my knowledge and belief. Or in the New York City complaint form that says, I have read the foregoing complaint and the contents thereof are true to the best of my knowledge. Should we stay or should we go? Thoughts?
What do you think will be okay, I'm tripping over my words. Let me start again. What is the fundamental outcome that you think will be produced by that change?
So folks on the CPCRB feel like the language that we have in local law 1 could discourage people from making complaints because it feels intimidating. So what they have recommended is using language that is less intimidating, that is like what I read in Albany or in New York City's complaint form.
So your feeling is it's less intimidating?
Not my feeling. I'm elevating, this was their feeling. And so this was one of the reasons that we didn't just pass local law 13, because like they brought this up as a complaint, and so I wanted to bring it up for discussion. If you want to know what my personal feeling about it is, I've had this conversation with them, my personal feeling is that is subjective. There is no evidence that that language is more or less intimidating than more general language. It's just the language that is in the penal code. That's my personal feeling. But I know that feeling is also not shared by everyone on the board, at least since when I've talked about it in the past. So I want to have it as a point of conversation here. But I was also trying not to give my opinion out front because I don't want to bias people. So I'm trying not to give my opinion initially, unless you ask for it.
Right, which I did, because so much of this, language is language and people interpret things. And the idea that, the truth is nobody's an expert on language. People hear what they hear, how they hear it differently. Everybody hears and sees things, and neither this board nor the CPRB have an expertise. It's all opinions. Everything's an opinion, but we have to move forward, right? One is a little, I guess, legalese, but there's a purpose for those, because legal language actually lasts a whole lot longer than the language of the day, which puts us back in a place of, for me, I am neither for it or against it, because I think they're both, and the fact that Albany has it, God knows, doesn't make it the best language. They're certainly not the experts in, nuance in language. And with all the municipalities, we can spend many more months looking at all different evidence of different language and sit around wondering whether this is better or worse. It's a hard call, I think, because it comes down to something subjective. But they always come down to something subjective. Bob?
Yeah,
please?
I mean, this is something I think we've discussed, and Stuart moved forward in proposing a law. We did not give him any direction to take it out. It sounds like we're just reopening the can of worms again. I'm okay with what we have in there now. Either way, something's got to be there. So that's what we had to go back and forth on this. So now
I think it's helpful. I appreciate you bringing that up, Bob. So the reason that we're discussing this as local law 1 and not local law 13 of 2021 is because we've discussed all of these things. And from when we discussed, I think it was the October 2021 version of local law 13, the CPCRB met in, I think, November or December to talk about the October version. And there were just not enough meetings for us to incorporate their feedback into whatever we may want to do. And so we decided, well, we don't have to pass it as local law 13 of 2021. We can pass it as local law 1 of 2022 and give us an opportunity during a work session to talk about the areas where they had some disagreements or some commentary. So all of these things will be things that we have already discussed. So if there is a change that we want to make, what I'm here to do is tell you, here's what they said and why they said it. And then we can choose to move in our original direction or to change it and respond to their feedback.
Right.
Okay, so as far as if this is one piece of the puzzle that we're going to discuss, I'm okay with the original version.
Okay. Does anybody? All right. So, and that's the purpose of the work session. Anybody else?
I will always err on the side of simplicity. You know, if you can say the same thing in a more direct way, in maybe language that's a little less, you know, legalese, why not?
Okay. Okay. Hearing you on that. Manny?
This was done with consultants. This was done previously before even came to us, and some of the changes that the suggestion that was made, I'm okay with keeping it the same way we have it right now.
Wait, what consultants did we use for this?
No. I'm talking about just like, the whole concept of like the police reform and everything else that we did and all the groups and some of the suggestions that we had. We came up with this part of the resolution within itself, not that we use consultants for that portion, but it was a lot of homework done. And I know it was a lot of work that Stuart did and all the other stuff. So, and Omar and you, Rika, were part of a lot of the changes or modifications that were made. So I'm okay with keeping the same way we have it.
Okay. Who am I leaving out besides myself? No, Omar. Omar, do you have a separate opinion? You've already stated your POV.
So here's the thing. So my perspective remains the same of I think that having it as it stands works. And if we get feedback from people that says, I would have submitted a complaint, but I felt intimidated by that language, then I would 100% be open to changing it. I just don't have any evidence that that's actually the case. And so I feel like, why not leave it as it is, which is the legal language. Now, the thing is that I can't be convinced. Like, I hear what Dana's saying. I hear what folks on the CPCRB have said that says, if it has a potential harm of being intimidating, why not change it to something that's going to be less intimidating and accomplishes the same goal of just saying, you can't, you affirm that you're not lying on the form. And so that's where I stand.
Okay. But you aren't convinced. The question is, we're at a work session, and
right. So I guess the reason that I'm trying to like,
are you convinced or are you not convinced?
So the reason that I'm teasing this out, because what I'm hearing both from Bob and Manny is like, well, like, we already did this. We got consultants. We already talked about this. Why would we change it? And so what I'm trying to do is elevate, like, here are the reasons. And so if I were to hear you say, like, I understand that they feel like it would be intimidating. I agree with Omar. I don't think that it's intimidating. So that's why I'm in favor of changing it. Then I would feel like, okay, I have a better sense. But like the same thing that Manny and Bob just said for this can apply to every other thing that I'm about to bring up. And I just don't have a better sense of what the rationale is. But we could just leave it exactly how it is. But that's the reason that it's at a work session, and this is not just an email, so that we can have conversation about it.
Right.
So let me ask another question. So sorry. So, and this question goes to Stuart. Part of the form itself, because it's a form, and it's more like, if I was going to go to the building department or planning department, sure, the applications are subjected to what either the building inspector at that time or the planner at that time feel that is needed to make that application, because we don't control the applications. We don't put the language in there. The concept is there, but we don't put the language in there. So if we were to modify, or the future board wanted to modify the language on the form of the complaint itself, can they easily do that without making the changes in the resolution?
If the local law says that the complaint is to include that language, that language is to be included in the complaint. You would then be changing your local law.
Okay.
You can't
you,
just
sir.
change the application and take the language out, because that's not what the local law says. It says, as it's written now, the complaint is to specifically have that language in it.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing, going back from Omar, is, you know, and please, if I'm putting words in your mouth, just let me know. You know, that you can be convinced otherwise. Sure. So I guess it's either or. Sure, someone don't mind signing this the way we have it right now. Someone can just be like, you know, I'm not lying, or I'm not making anything up. You know, this is my prerogative to make this kind of statement, and we move forward regardless of what the language is, because they feel that is something happened with a police officer, and they need to make this complaint. Sure, that's what this is for, you know, to make a complaint about something so the investigation can start. If someone feels that that by us having this type of language in that form or part of our laws, they don't want to make the complaint, we won't know until that happens. So if the concept is the same, the end result is going to be the same. What will be something that you, because when the reason why I'm saying this is you, Omar, because you've been one of the trustees who's been involved in this whole process. Sure. That's why I'm sort of single you out on this. So if it was something different, what would be that option that you may want to recommend to the board? Because I'm sort of kind of looking to you as to give me a guidance to where can we go? What will be the compromise that you can bring to us to say, look, this is something that I can compromise on this, and it will do the same thing.
Right. So where the line of disagreement really is in the very first sentence of the language here, where it says making a punishable false written statement when he knowingly makes a false statement. So the whole thing is the issue that the CPCRB has is this is going to tell people, like, you know, like if I'm making a complaint against a police officer and, like, you know, maybe I get a detail wrong, or I mess something up and like it wasn't true. I said that it was on a Wednesday, it was actually on a Tuesday or whatever. And then the body cam footage shows that I was not telling the truth in the complaint, that I was wrong. Would I be then punishable by law? No, the whole thing here is that it's a knowing false statement. So like you knowingly said something that's not true. And that's a much higher bar than just saying you made a mistake in something that is in the form. That is why I personally think the language that is there is appropriate. It is clear. It's, you know, not fancy. It's not beautiful, but it is very, very clear. I also personally don't think that it is intimidating. But and it looks like at the very least Bob and you agree that it is not intimidating. Dana is going more for the simplicity route. With that being the case, great, fine. So we can just leave it as it is. The point that I was making was I'm leaving the door open, that if someone, if a person or people, if we started to get feedback that says, I would have made a complaint, I would have filed this complaint, but I felt intimidating because what if I said the wrong thing and I'm going to be punished by law? Then we can bring this conversation back up and say, hey, this is actually deterring people from making complaints. What if we change it to something that is more generic, like New York or Albany has, that doesn't have the language around knowingly making a false statement, and just says everything I wrote here is true to the best of my belief. That's what I'm saying. I'm just leaving the door open for this to revisit this later on, and not just saying it's closed forever. That to me is the compromise, as opposed to saying like, let's figure out like legal language that is both broad, but also reflects the penal code, which it's either one or the other.
Okay. So I guess Stuart, let me ask you this hypothetical question, just that very simple example that Omar said. You know, if someone says it was a Wednesday, but in reality was a Thursday, based on the body camera, that video, or any other evidence that was found later on through the investigations, what happens to that person if, you know, if that is the case?
He didn't knowingly make a false statement, so it's not a Class A misdemeanor. It's not a violation.
Yeah.
He has to knowingly make a false statement. If he got the date wrong, it's not knowingly making a false statement. The case would never be prosecuted. I mean, I can't, that's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Stuart. No, and so I totally understand that. And you know, that just goes back to what I was agreeing with you, Omar. And yeah, if we find, you know, and in the future that people feel uncomfortable coming to try to make a complaint using the form based on the language in there, we can revisit that at the time and make the changes as accordingly that we need to do. So, but right now, you know, I think I'm comfortable with passing the way it is right now.
I think what we're missing here is exactly what Stuart just said, knowingly. They purposely went in there and made a false statement. That should not stop someone from making a complaint. They're knowingly, that means they purposely went in and filed a complaint. Who knows? They didn't like that cop. And they, whatever the case is, knowingly is the key word in there. That shouldn't deter anybody that's on the up and up and making their statement.
Right, I agree with you, Bob. I don't think that the word knowingly isn't what they felt was the intimidating part. It was the last sentence that says making a punishable false written statement is a Class A misdemeanor. That's the part. But I think we've generally came to a consensus, so I don't want to belabor the point.
So for me, the biggest part of this is to publicly let the public know that there is a way to make complaints, mincing and cutting words up in order to retrofit people and what they think stops people without evidence that it actually is doing that, to me just gets us spinning around the drain. And that's why we keep talking about it. The reality is that we have to do a better job letting people know that the evidence that we do have is that there are members of the community that didn't know CPRB existed. So instead of work, I feel like we spend a lot of time on nuance, but the big story that I learned is not about this piece, and this won't change for me anything. The real issue is to let the public know that there is a CPRB, that complaints against misbehavior is perfectly acceptable in our community to make complaints against police. However, the fact that you make complaints doesn't take away the fact that you have to be truthful. That you can't just say, oh, gee, I didn't know in that. No, you did know. And we take it seriously on both sides of the equation. A, that people should know they have a place to go to, and B, that you can't use it as instruments for personal vendettas, and you didn't like the person, that it's serious, that putting a complaint is serious. And please do put in complaints, because that is a serious issue as well, so that everyone has a say in this. That to me is actually the more important issue. This to me is so subjective. I am fine with the way it's written, because I think that it's good. You know, I mean, honestly, I just don't have evidence to the other, as you so stated, Omar, and we've had this conversation. There's nothing that I can say. And by the way, I agree with Dana that simple is better. The problem with simple is it's oftentimes when we simplify serious issues, it's also a way to get out of things without taking them seriously. You know, there's a real balance here, and there's an important balance to be discussed. And the real issue for me is that we have to let people know CPRB exists, and that we don't hold it against anybody to complain against police. If something happened, that is something wrong, you have many venues, including the CPRB, to put in a complaint against a police officer or a police department or whatever it is. It's available to you, because that's what I learned was actually the problem. So for me, the words are fine. The law needs to be passed, because we will be going around this, because whenever you discuss opinions without evidence, the arguments go on and on and on. And you start mincing and dicing and slicing words. And I don't think that's really the goal here. And I don't think the CPRB intended that be the goal. I think that they've made it very clear that they feel this should be done. And I think we've discussed it. But I also think that we need to bring this to an end and a close. And for me, I would leave this going. I'd like to get this law passed, because there's a lot of stuff in here that needs to be done that I think we all agree needs to move forward. And sometimes gotta do the green light here. So I am for green lighting this piece. It doesn't sound like anybody, Dana did say, to simplify. The problem is I don't know that simplifies it, those words, for me personally. And so I would go ahead with this. I think there is a majority vote on, just consensus on it. So Stuart, I think you should move forward with this. I think we will discover in not too long a time if we need to make some changes, and we'll have to do it the way we do with everything else. We put it out, we live, we learn, we make some changes as we need to. But I am serious about the fact, and this goes to the chief as well, and really to the village manager in helping us, need to do a little bit more communicating that the instrument exists. That's the big headline, actually. And then we'll find out if people want to, if there are more complaints and a rise in complaints, and if people find it difficult, they need to contact us and say, look, I don't get this, what's happening here. And then we'll know, and we'll have a little bit more evidence. I'm just wrapping it up. Yeah.
So there are other issues, given how long it took to talk about this one, that I'm just going to name them. I'm going to name what the issues are that they named. And then there is one that I do want to discuss, but if you want to discuss others. Okay. So one is that the monthly meeting requirement is removed. So the former language said that the CPCRB had to meet every month. That language is being removed. The rationale being that if there's no reason to meet, then they shouldn't have to meet. But okay, we can talk about that if you want to. Two is the addition of a one-year term for the chair and vice chair with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. So it's the term limit for chair and vice chair is the point of contention. They basically want no term limits for chair and vice chair. We have term limits for chair and vice chair. Is that something that we should change? That's their contention. Number 3, that members of the CPCRB may not be employed by the school district or immediate family members of employees. They found that to be too much. If somebody on the CPCRB has an uncle that is custodian at the school, how does that impact their ability to be on the CPCRB? Why would that make them unable to be on the CPCRB? Right. That's their argument. Talk about it if you wish. Number 4, term limits for members and alternate members should be clarified. And then finally, the one that I do want to make sure that we do discuss, which is changing the appointment of chair and vice chair, so that formerly it was the CPCRB themselves that elected their own chair and vice chair, and now we're changing it so that it is an appointment by the board. I want to make sure that we talk about that one because I feel like that's a big deal. I want to make sure that we at least have the conversation publicly before we move forward with confirming local law 1.
Okay, so working backwards, thank you for that. Working backwards, I think the board actually appoints, this is a brand new committee, so let's be very clear about that. I don't remember the last time we had a brand new committee. We reinvigorated the landlord tenant because it was not, wasn't alive. There were members, but there was nothing happening for a number of years on that one, but it actually existed. This is a committee that exists, and we made significant changes. I apologize, it's not a brand new, but we've made significant changes. I remember how we re-engineered landlord tenant. That's what I actually meant to say. We appoint, I think, the chairs in other committees. There's a lack of consistency over the years. Different things we just heard from the Arts Council. They're sort of very different, and they came about very differently. So there's a little bit of inconsistency, I think. That happens over time, and we try to make adjustments every year or two and make sure things are in the right shape. I don't personally have an issue with the board choosing, especially on a reinvigorated committee, that it chooses the chair and vice chair. I don't actually see a reason for changing it because I don't see the pros and cons.
So I can
So,
very quickly name,
please.
So their pushback is, if you look at something like the Board of Ethics, like the Board of Trustees has no involvement with the Board of Ethics. So we have no idea what's happening during their meetings. So we would have a hard time saying this person would be a good fit for chair or vice chair. CPCRB is not the Board of Ethics, but if they are hearing a complaint, then the Board of Trustees can't attend those meetings. And so depending on how often they get complaints, maybe we are attending more meetings, maybe we're attending very few meetings, but we may not have full insight into who may actually be a good fit for chair or vice chair. And so they themselves, being people that are in every meeting, have a better sense of that. That is their argument for why.
No, I get that. I've heard this. This is not new. And the answer is the board of, is not a good example. It's not a good analogy. It's not a good discussion. The Board of Ethics, in many cases, is actually had to deal with the people like us. Really, for a while, they dealt with the mayor and complaints against mayors and trustees as much as anything else, because in our village, if it's an employee with ethical issues, it goes to the village manager, because she actually is the COO. And so it goes to her. And it's only if one of our direct reports and in the village, if there are complaints against us. That is the reason that we shouldn't be appointing the chair and vice chair. It has nothing to do with really any other committee. That's an anomaly. In comparison to an anomaly is not a good, to an exception. And there's a reason there's an exception. And there's a history to why there's an exception. It is also why our attorney only gets involved if they asked, because really there have also been complaints about attorneys of the village, and the Board of Ethics had to deal with it. Therefore, it becomes a conflict. And we've had to re-engineer that whole committee to suit and be very pragmatic. So I just don't find that to be a good comparison as it compares to other boards and councils. I actually, and again, I don't want to speak for the whole board, it's just that I was involved in reinstituting a number of committees, and Manny and I had to reconstitute, and Trustee Bazemore and I had to reconstitute the landlord tenant, and we spent, a year and a half on it. The Board of Ethics, I did that with John Codman. It's something that's very familiar to me, which is why I discuss it with some knowledge and some institutional knowledge, and how things fall in place, so that people understand they don't just appear. And this is not like every committee is exactly the same. It helps to have consistency. The land use board should have some consistency. The Arts Council and the Downtown Council were devised and created in a totally different way. So this sort of comparison.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to be clear that because like we often say, we're designing this language to not just be for the people of today, but also is going to apply to people in the future. Right. It is conceivable that people in the future, that a future Board of Trustees would, given Local Law 1 of 2022, be responsible for naming the chair and vice chair of the CPCRB. And it's also conceivable that the liaison or whomever had very little insight into how the CPCRB had been running, because they had been viewing complaints or managing complaints or adjudicating complaints or whatever. And so they hadn't gone to many or any meetings. And so they would not have any data to say, here's who I think would be a good chair or vice chair, because the BOT cannot attend meetings of the CPCRB if they are viewing or discussing a complaint. And so that is
Specific
the
complaint, right?
right. So it is possible that there is a future of where that's the case. And so that then the BOT will be making a decision basically arbitrarily saying, I think this person would be a good fit based on what I've heard. But with every other group, we can go to the Ossining Arts Council or the Rec Advisory Board meetings as a liaison and say, hey, I've seen this person in the meetings. I think that they're good, and make a recommendation based off of that. That's the difference, that we can't necessarily attend every meeting.
Right.
That's the argument.
So this is a work session which allows conversation. So let me then do the corollary of that. So if I agree with you that makes sense, if I do, then to me it's very logical that term limits are absolutely necessary, because if what we've had in other committees, 2 committees, I believe the chair stayed on for more than a decade. I believe a Rec Advisory Board had a chair for more than 20 years. And because one of the human interactions that occurs is that there comes into a group interaction where people who are, let's call them incumbents, sort of stay that way. And they make sure that everybody else is like their people, because they end up having a lot of control about who sits there and informing who sits there. That isn't something that is theoretical. It's actually something that had occurred in this village, which is why we restructured so many of the councils. It isn't to say, by the way, that the person on the Rec Advisory Board was not a good chair. She happened to have been, I met her at the end of her tenure, and she moved out of Ossining. People loved her. It's not to say that they're good or they're bad. That's not the issue. The issue is that nobody ever wanted to run against her. And she was there for more than 20 years. And I think on the EAC, there was somebody there, and I'm sure Stuart will correct me, but I don't think he was even around, that was there for more than a decade. And there were no changes on landlord tenants since 1990 something. I mean, once I have to go into 19, it's already too long. Because people sort of get set up and they dominate the conversation, intentionally or non-intentionally, good or bad, that is not the discussion. It's not healthy in the course of change. So if it makes sense that a liaison cannot view 100% of the activity, maybe only 30%, because 70%, let's just put some percentages, and that's the argument, then it's a very strong argument for term limits. And that I would buy. I mean, for me, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. That would be like rational to me.
Right.
And I'm not arguing with you. I'm simply listening to you. And I've heard the arguments from Ms. Cabrera, who's the chair. I've heard the arguments. Well, mostly Ms. Cabrera as the chair represents the committee. So my understanding is that there's conversation going. I have no reason to believe there isn't.
So the local law 1 of 2022, as it stands, has both the BOT naming the chair and vice chair and term limits.
I understand.
Yeah.
You brought that up.
Right. So what I heard you say was that that is okay. I understand what you're saying now. Okay. Anybody else? Does anybody else feel any kind of way about whether we should keep it as it is, or change it back to the CPCRB themselves choosing chair and vice chair?
I think we should keep it the same way we have it. You know, one of the things that, you know, a lot of people, and again, cannot speak.
Excuse me, Manny, on both instances, because there are 2 things, right? There is term limits, there's BOT choosing chair, correct? That's 2 things.
No, correct.
Right.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that like Rika mentioned, you know, this is one of them I'm hoping to be, you know, this will be the 3rd board that I'm sort of part of it, that we've been involved. And that being said, I feel that, you know, we have liaison for a reason. You know, all of us here that sits on this board have different committees or board liaison that we attend to, the meetings that we attend to. So we get to know the people in there. Now, that being said, we don't, obviously there are boards that we don't appoint people. that's the manager's portion, and she appoints the chair of those committees as well. I think we, based on right now, if we wanted to appoint someone, the person that I will lean to is you, Omar, because you know them and you have interactions with them, so right now I'll say, Omar, what do you think? Who should be the most appropriate chair going forward for the next term? In the future, I'm sure there's going to be, and I hope to encourage the future trustees that also be involved in this process. So I think that doesn't mean that we won't know who they are. That's why we have a process. So based on that, and I think always a fresh set of eyes every couple of years will also help on this committee as well. So
the term limit piece makes sense. I don't quite follow the, so there is, let's say there's always going to be a board of trustees liaison. What do you say, Manny, to the argument, right, I'm a liaison, but I haven't been able to go to the last 6 months worth of meetings because they've been talking about complaints. And so if from July to December, I haven't gone to a CPCRB meeting, and now it's January, and the mayor turns to me and says, Omar, as a liaison, who do you think should be the chair? I'll go, well, I haven't been able to go to a meeting in 6 months, but in June I went and this person was good, I think. And so that's the argument, that that is a possibility.
Yeah.
With that, like,
sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that will be the case in the future, or if any case, one of the things that I will hope as a board will do is probably we'll do an internal sort of like a mini interview from all the board members. Sure, we can create a process within itself. And then we go through the questionnaires. What is this? What is that? We ask opinions. We interview the members to actually get the basis out of themselves, and then we can take a decision from there. There's different ways to accomplish the same goal. I think, us doing that and should be, obviously at that point, like I said, I don't think that will be an impediment for us or for future boards, I hope.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we do need to move this forward. We're gonna have to look, last week we finished quite early. We finished early the week before. This is gonna be a late night because we're discussing things that are having us really go into detail. That's cool. I'm actually okay with for me. And I was like, I'm listening to you, Omar. I'm getting the feedback. I've heard it also, as I said. I'm okay if there's term limits. There's got to be a checks and balance. And Manny's right. We can just call people up and say, hey, what do you think is going on? Because I got to tell you, on other committees, when we didn't have term limits, and when some of the committees chose their own chair, it really, I don't want to say became political, intentionally or not. It's not better or worse than the board doing it through interviewing people and saying, who would you like to be? Because people sometimes feel speak more freely with us than they will to somebody they sit on the board with, who's their chair, and they might have issues with them. Again, they could also call us anyway and say, I have a problem with this chairperson and how they're behaving, and like, you guys have to do something. So I see both sides. I feel, as I said before, I'm okay with who chooses if there are term limits, and vice versa. Like, for me, it's fine. I don't know how we're going to get to this discussion, because I'm not getting all 5 members to actually sort of say, this is what we need to do, which we sort of need, because Stuart can't go to the next step if we don't have a majority consensus on the items. The other item that you talked about was the monthly meeting. We've taken away that they don't have to have monthly meetings. I thought that was done for a convenience purpose. So I'm not clear what's happening.
So because if the local law says, or the legislation says that they have to meet every month, then even if there's nothing on the agenda, then they would have to meet and say, all right, we met, even if they're meeting for 1 minute, just to be able to come. And it just feels like, well, that's silly. If they don't need to meet, they shouldn't have to meet. But the pushback was, well, when this kind of new cohort of CPCRB members got together, there was a period of 6 months where there weren't any CPCRB meetings. And so if you take away the requirement to meet every month, then you could have the same kind of situation where the CPCRB doesn't meet for an extended period of time. That's their argument.
Okay, that's
My thoughts on that is, it says that they don't have to meet. We're not requiring them to meet, but it's up to if the chairperson wants to meet, and if it's just for the 1 minute, they're more than welcome to meet. We're just saying that we're not requiring them to meet.
That's right.
I don't really see a problem with that, me personally.
yeah, and that wasn't the reason they didn't meet for 6 months. And the chair can call meetings, and it's frankly a convenience.
Absolutely.
And yeah, there's a fifth one. That's at number 4. There was what was the first one? There's term limits. There is the board voting on chair, vice chair, this monthly, and we did the other piece, which
and
was
the employment, the members may not be employed by the school district or immediate family members of employees.
Stuart, can you, I know the school board has a lot of rules about their board members and what they can sit on. We generally don't have as many. What was the thing about if they work in the school system being the issue? That I didn't get.
Mayor, I don't know. This has been in every iteration of the local law that has been
I
drafted.
got it.
So I can't answer your question. I apologize. It's just
That's
been
right.
there.
Yeah, I know it has been there, and it's also come up as an issue, and I'm not even sure how to investigate why it's in there in the first place. There's got to be a reason why it's in there.
We don't have a history of it. It's just always been there.
Got it. Kevin, you have any idea why it's in there?
We don't have a history of why it was put in there. I'm not saying that right. We just know that it's there.
Okay, Kevin, do you have any idea why it's there?
No, I had no part in writing any of this.
Okay, but so you don't have, but you've been around a while, and do you have any insight for us as to why the school piece is somehow in there? There's always a reason why things get written into legislation. It doesn't just happen. There's usually incidents of some sort.
How do we know this wasn't blueprinted over from something else? And
it could have been, Bob, that you're totally right. I think as we've discussed it, when we discussed it on the CPCRB, the rationale that came up there was if you have someone that is like, say again?
Okay. I was thinking that it's because there's also police officers in the school system.
Right. But then they would be employees of the village of Ossining.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's it. So it's like what local law 1 says. Members or alternate members shall not be elected officials or employees of the village or the town or the school district or immediate family members of such elected official or employees. So that's why the CPCRB's particular point was, why does if my spouse is a teacher, why would that exclude me from being able to serve on the CPCRB?
Right. I'm focused not on the electeds and all that. That actually makes sense to me, etc.
Right.
I'm only focused on the schools is like a pseudo municipality. It's a taxing entity, and therefore, by definition, it's own. The school system actually argues the reason none of their members can sit and anything has a lot to do with that. I'm not quite sure I agree with their policy, but that is something that they have as a policy. I don't actually see a problem with this whole school system piece. Yes, and that means that we have to once again go back and rewrite something. Not we, but Stuart does. And we seem to be going around in circles. But I do think this is part of a process when you have when you're making a lot of changes to longstanding legislation and you're trying to create an active board. I mean, these things do come up. We spent a lot of time on landlord tenant, frankly. And we didn't even end up putting everything we wanted to. So we've been through this with others. What are your thoughts on this, folks? The whole school system relative thing.
I agree with Eureka. I think the school piece could probably come out. And if there's a case that comes up that this person should know enough to recuse himself.
Right, and the chair can also bring it to our attention if there are
Right.
issues with any singular individual. Does anybody on this gallery, including the chief, including anybody sitting in this gallery, see a reason why we need to keep this school piece in there, except that it's a lot of work for Stuart, and I apologize for that. And we could have done this probably months ago, but we're doing it tonight. Is there anybody that understands or sees a reason why that needs to be left there, the school system part? Okay, so thank you for bringing that to, and we've heard this before. This is not new. You know, we have a lot on the plate. Some things take a little longer than others.
May I just be clear then? What's
Yes.
coming out simply is the Ossining Union Free School District, those 5 words, that's all that's coming out?
That's right.
Okay.
But that was the issue, correct? Is why would we
That's
not
the-
permit somebody?
Mayor, with all due respect, I don't even remember what the issues are.
I
at
know,
this
I
point.
got it. Stuart, I get it. I
I mean,
totally
this is-
understand this has been going on forever. I get
Yes.
it.
Okay, that'll come out. That's fine. That's what the
That's
board
it.
wants. Is there anything else in this local law other than those 5 words that is in this local law now that the board wants changed?
Well, what I didn't hear from my colleagues, only Omar, myself, and Manny, and we didn't come to a conclusion, was term limits. Leave them, change them. Election of vice chair and chair, leave it, change it. I didn't hear from the other 2.
I'm in favor of term limits. All right, because just about every other board that whether we appoint them or the manager appoints, there's term limits.
Okay, so term limits, yes, that's
As far as appointing the chair and vice chair, I kind of lean with Manny on that our liaison, or we call people in when it's that time and say, have that discussion. Like you say, I don't want it to be like the EAC with someone that's there for decades because they have a monopoly on controlling the board.
and I want, if this is being recorded, at no point did someone complain about the person themselves.
Right.
But nobody would run against them.
No, it's nothing like that, but I
Yeah,
think, we should, at the time, when it's time to appoint a chair and a vice chair, we should get the temperature of the people on the board.
Of
And
that board.
I don't, it's just, I could go either way, but I think I feel better if it was us controlling that and having that conversation, just like Manny suggests.
Interviewing members to get a temperature
Right.
check. Okay.
And then term limits is a no-brainer for me. That's,
Oh, it is. Okay. Well, that's fine. Manny, I think you gave Dana, please. And again, if you want to, I'm just trying to get direction for Stuart because we've got to bring this to a close. You're on mute, Dana. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear the first few words.
I think we should be consistent as possible across the committees.
So you would like to see what?
I don't know what the other committees do.
Okay.
So I've asked Stuart this question. I do have this information. Other than the Board of Ethics, every other board, and there may be one exception that I don't have in front of me, but other than that, every other one is either a mayoral appointment, a BOT appointment, or a village manager appointment.
Because the boards serve the village board. I mean, the whole concept of these boards, these are not non-for-profits or advocacy groups, or their purpose actually is fundamentally to help the board make decisions. They're not independent organizations. Those are called advocacy organizations. And that's probably fundamentally one of the reasons that happens. And I already explained why the BOE doesn't work that way. So thank you, Omar. I was only going like that because I know we've had that. So now knowing that, Dana, the consistency will therefore be, if that's what you want, the consistency.
There's a hand up in the gallery. Are we taking comment? I don't know.
This is a work session. It's not a public,
Well, then we'll be consistent with that, if that's what happens.
if you're looking for consistency, those are, that's the way
I'm not
they
quite sure
work.
why it should be different.
If that's your criteria, okay. I mean, I think it's the right criteria. I'm not putting words in people's mouths, that's all. Okay, so the changes that are occurring is the school system change. Term limits is a yes. I'm going through the list that you had presented.
So basically, in short, everything is going to stay exactly as it is in local law 1, except the removal of the school district language.
Yes, that is correct.
Right.
And this can be revisited and like every other thing that we do. But I do think that we've discussed this to the nth degree at this point. And at some point we do have to green light things. Okay. Kevin, is there anything that you would like to add that I may have missed and I should have asked you that I didn't think about, or anybody else?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We're going to have to change the agenda. Again, we have ended some earlier. This evening is running late, although I think the seal discussion was fantastic. And we've talked about it for quite a while, so I'm glad that has gotten the green light to go forward. Now we're moving through this. I'm looking at the agenda. So village manager, let's just go because you and I do this agenda. We need to move things out because we also have exec session, I believe, after this. So can we move? What do we absolutely have to do because time is of the essence? The Elks Lodge request? Is that something we must do tonight?
We can do that tonight, and then we can move the policy discussions to next week's meeting. We can do them during new business.
Okay, I think that's where we're going to go with that. Okay, I'm just looking at the agenda. So let's do the Elks Lodge, please, and then we can move forward.
Thank you. This is an application by the Elks Lodge for a cabaret license. They are seeking cabaret license for 2 nights a week, Thursday and Saturday, from 6 to 10 p.m. That's comparable to what they have now.
Okay.
I'm
Did the
advised
chief
by
leave the
chief he has
meeting?
no objections. The chief has advised me that he had no objections.
Yeah,
to the
I didn't think so.
application.
Anybody
What
have
were
any
the,
issues?
What were the hours again?
6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
2 nights a week, and they're Thursday night and Saturday.
Correct.
I say we move this to a
Yeah,
resolution.
so do I. That's within all our parameters. Anybody have any objections?
No.
Okay. Got that one. Anything else?
That would be it, Mayor.
Okay, so can I get a vote for adjournment to go into executive session? Yes, Stuart?
So move.
That's fine.
Okay.
Mayor. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. 11:04 on the 26th of January. We will see you for legislative session next Wednesday, and meeting's adjourned.